On the morning of September 28, 1994, 18-year-old Bonnie Craig woke at 5 a.m., prepared herself, loaded her notebooks into her backpack, and, as was her routine, made her way to the bus stop. Bonnie departed before the sun was up. She faced a 45-minute journey to the bus stop and preferred to get to the university slightly early.
Bonnie Christine Craig entered the world in Calgary, Canada, on March 30th, 1976. Her biological father played a minor role in her upbringing. Bonnie and her older sibling Jason were brought up by their stepfather, Gary Campbell, who cherished the children and embraced them as his own from their very first encounter. At the age of 5, Bonnie welcomed a new brother, Adam, into the family, courtesy of Karen and Gary, and a sister, Samantha, arrived 2 years thereafter. The younger sister turned into Bonnie's cherished playmate. She took joy in outfitting Samantha in fairy tale gowns and imparting to her all the knowledge she had acquired. The family patriarch, Gary, had a long-standing career in the oil and gas sector and was frequently relocated to various locations. Bonnie was accustomed to changing schools, having attended 6 elementary schools and 2 high schools, which taught her to adapt to new environments and forge friendships with ease. From the sun-drenched locales of California with a backyard pool to the snowy expanses of Anchorage, then to West Texas, and ultimately returning to the picturesque views of Alaska. However, the unexpected divorce of Karen and Gary marked a significant shift for the children. Now, Samantha and Adam alternated weeks between their father and mother. Bonnie dedicated herself to her academic pursuits. She was also involved in swimming and diving teams, pursued horseback riding, penned poetry, and contributed to the school orchestra with her violin and viola skills. Yet, life continued to present her with unforeseen challenges. Just as she was reconciling with her parents' divorce, Bonnie's dearest friend perished in a drunk driving incident. This tragedy profoundly altered Bonnie's perspective on life. She pledged to abstain from alcohol and avoid driving, preferring instead to navigate by foot or use public transit. Her aversion to driving was so strong that she chose not to obtain a driver's license, fearing involvement in a vehicular accident. Craig also initiated a campaign against drunk driving at her high school. Upon completing her secondary education, Bonnie pursued a degree in psychology at the University of Alaska in Anchorage. Her partner, Cameron Miyazaki, was immersed in architectural studies at the University of California, Berkeley. They maintained their connection through frequent phone conversations and email exchanges. As her home became increasingly populated due to her mother's relationship with Jim Foster, who brought along 3 kids of his own, Bonnie opted for more autonomy by relocating to her stepfather's residence. This move was strategic, as it placed her a mere 15-minute car ride from her college. Adhering to her vows, she utilized public transportation to attend classes 3 times a week, relishing the brisk walks to the bus station under the fresh Alaskan skies. Bonnie also held a part-time job at Sam's Club. Her life was full of passions and grounds for optimism. On the morning of September 28, 1994, Bonnie departed from her stepfather's residence towards the bus stop, setting off for her university classes. 9 hours afterward, a fellow student from the University of Anchorage, while capturing landscape photographs on a walking path in Chugach State Park, approximately 15 miles from Bonnie's home, stumbled upon a scene. Mid-September presents an ideal opportunity to appreciate the park's beauty, thanks to Alaska's relatively warm temperatures, extended daylight, and stunning vistas. As this student adjusted her lens for a scenic shot, her gaze was drawn to an anomaly in the water near the cliff's edge, a strikingly blue item floating. Moving closer for a clearer view, she encountered a chilling sight. In the shallow waters, the motionless form of a woman floated, face down and in an odd posture, fully dressed. This section of McHugh Creek, challenging to access except from the cliff's peak or by navigating the streambed for miles, suggested a tragic accident. The initial assumption was that the individual had accidentally slipped from above, leading to a fatal fall. This theory was the first conclusion drawn by the responding officers. The unfortunate woman, perhaps captivated by the park's tranquility and beauty, lost her footing and met her untimely demise. The remains were taken to the coroner's office for an examination to ascertain the cause of the injuries and to facilitate identification. The autopsy findings revealed that the young woman had drowned and also suffered significant head trauma, likely from a fall off a cliff. A distinctive class ring, often worn by graduates as a symbol of their educational achievements,
enabled detectives to identify the victim as Bonnie Craig. The subsequent step involved reaching out to the victim's family to verify their initial findings. The devastating news of her daughter's demise reached Karen during a brief getaway with her new companion Jim to a quaint port town for a relative's wedding. This was a special trip where Jim had spent his childhood, and Karen was set to meet Jim's parents for the first time. Engrossed in the company of her soon-to-be in-laws, sharing laughter and stories, Karen was blissfully unaware of the grim fate that had claimed her beloved Bonnie. They were aboard a yacht when at 3 a.m., a knock on the door shattered the peace. Confronted with the harrowing news of her daughter, Karen initially dismissed it as a sick prank. The thought of her conscientious daughter being alone in the park, rather than attending her college classes, was inconceivable and would naturally devastate any parent who has nurtured concern for their child from birth. However, Karen was far from a typical parent. For the past 3 years, she had served undercover for the Anchorage Police Department, having graduated from the police academy and specializing in narcotics distribution cases. Her problem-solving skills earned her the deep respect of her peers. Despite her dedication to her profession, Karen's commitment to her family was unwavering. Yet, with her investigative background, she instinctively doubted the initial assessment of Bonnie's death as an accident. Karen's priority became to have the investigation transferred to her own department, convinced there was more to her daughter's tragic end. Overwhelmed by sorrow, Karen sought specifics on the tragic event. She questioned if there were indications of sexual violence, to which the authorities noted the victim's clothed state, a detail that offered no definitive conclusions. Karen was aware that a deeper investigation was necessary. She couldn't reconcile how her daughter, who was meticulous about her commitments and lacked a driver's license, could end up isolated miles from home during academic hours. The absence of Bonnie's personal items at the scene further mystified Karen, suggesting to her a possible inclination within the police force to hastily categorize the incident as an unfortunate mishap. Yet, Karen was not prepared to relent in her pursuit of the truth. Taking the earliest flight back to Alaska for the formal identification, Karen clung to a sliver of hope that perhaps there had been a mistake, that it wasn't her Bonnie who had perished. The most harrowing moment was upon her as she entered the morgue, a scene straight out of a cinematic narrative, but starkly real. Approaching the gurney shrouded with a white sheet, she hesitantly unveiled the face of the deceased to find her daughter, Bonnie, in a state of eternal rest. It was unequivocally her child. Instinctively, both as a bereaved mother and as a law enforcement officer, Karen felt certain this wasn't a simple accident. When she clasped her daughter's hand, noting the bruised and swollen knuckles, she demanded the police document what she perceived as defensive injuries. This evidence, she believed, was crucial, especially as it represented perhaps the last opportunity to collect any leads before her daughter's burial. Despite the police's skepticism, attributing the injuries to a fall, Karen resolved to adopt a different approach in her quest for justice. Karen reached out to her media contacts, initiating a public awareness campaign. The story of a young, vibrant university student found deceased in a creek captured the attention of all local media outlets, spreading the news far more swiftly than the detectives could manage. Karen attempted to engage her superior, hoping for assistance as precious time was fading, but was informed that the matter fell beyond their operational scope. The following day, an emotionally charged gathering took place at the funeral home as Karen, Jim, Gary, Jason, Adam, and Samantha came together to bid their final farewells to Bonnie. The stark contrast between Bonnie's erstwhile vivacity and her now inert form weighed heavily on everyone, particularly her siblings, who sought to pay their respects one last time. Faced with the urgency to select a casket, Karen, ever cautious of preserving any latent evidence, opted for a stone crypt, considering the possibility of future exhumation in light of new insights. Despite her efforts to seek justice through media engagement, the endeavor seemed to complicate matters more than it aided. Summoned to the police station, Karen was urged to desist from labeling the incident as criminal to avoid obstructing the ongoing investigation. The police were methodically examining all leads, including Gary Campbell, Bonnie's stepfather, as a potential suspect. Their suspicion was piqued by discrepancies in Gary's alibi and reported tensions between him and Bonnie, a revelation that left Karen reeling with disbelief. The notion that Gary, who had lovingly raised Bonnie, could be implicated in such a tragedy was unfathomable. Complications escalated when Karen visited Gary's residence to retrieve her daughter's effects, only to discover Bonnie's room locked. Gary's accusation of theft against Karen for removing a photograph of Bonnie without his consent underscored the tension between them. He insisted on preserving his memories of the daughter he cherished, further muddling an already complex situation with suspicions and grievances. The untimely demise of Bonnie deeply impacted her younger sibling Samantha, who was merely 12 years old when the tragedy occurred. Samantha began to face difficulties in school and found it hard to focus at home. She used to share everything with Bonnie and felt utterly adrift without her guidance. The confusion stemming from her elder sister's passing even led her to question her trust in her own father, leaving her uncertain about what to accept as true. One evening, as Gary tucked Samantha into bed, she gazed at him with eyes brimming with fear and questioned whether he was responsible for Bonnie's death. Taken aback and wounded by the suspicion, Gary regained his composure and reassured Samantha that he would never cause harm to her sister, a statement that soothed the young girl and helped her to trust in her father's words. Subsequently, the police conducted interviews with Adam and Samantha, who, without collusion, both affirmed that on the day Bonnie passed away, their father, Gary, had been present at home, leaving for work only after the sister had departed. His alibi was corroborated by work colleagues and supervisors, dispelling the doubts cast upon him. The post-mortem examination revealed that Bonnie had been deceased for several hours before her discovery, with drowning being the cause of death. Additionally, she had sustained severe head injuries, possibly from a fall off a cliff or from being struck with a heavy object. The authorities took a keen interest in determining how the victim had arrived at the park, carefully scrutinizing the area. Initially deemed an accident, Bonnie's death came under scrutiny when a detective, searching near the cliff's brink on hands and knees, discovered a leaf stained with a single droplet of blood a few feet from the edge. Upon testing, it was confirmed to belong to Bonnie, prompting inquiries into the presence of the blood if her injuries were sustained from the fall. This discovery led investigators to contemplate the notion that Bonnie's fall may not have been an accident, but rather the result of someone else's actions. Detectives were aware that cracking this case would be difficult and necessitated cautious action on their part. Consequently, they refrained from notifying both the press and the family regarding their suspicions of criminal activity. This strategy was deliberate, aiming not to tip off the culprit, pondering over the possibility that it might be an individual close to the young girl who had passed away. Thus, the surge of information sparked by Karen could potentially obstruct the investigative process. The funeral of Bonnie Craig gathered all who loved her: family, friends, acquaintances, as well as her boyfriend from California, who came to say his final goodbyes. He was deeply saddened, as he could never have imagined such a tragic end to their story together. Bonnie's biological father, Gordon Craig, who had not been actively involved in her upbringing, also attended to bid farewell to his daughter, showing that, despite everything, he still felt a bond with her. The service was held in a church that Bonnie occasionally attended. It was a moment for everyone who knew this cheerful and bright girl to honor her memory for the last time, share fond memories of her, and support each other during this difficult time. A week after Bonnie's passing, the silence from the police prompted Karen to initiate her own investigation. She meticulously followed her daughter's entire pre-dawn journey from Gary's residence, attempting to grasp what Bonnie might have felt that morning, her possible thoughts, and the details that might have caught her attention. For the first time, Karen perceived the route's inherent danger, a path her daughter traversed multiple times a week, flanked by towering trees on both sides, where the darkness made it seem as though each tree could conceal a potential threat, be it a wild animal or a menacing individual. Karen pondered why Bonnie never requested her stepfather to drive her to the bus stop, and why she kept silent about the treacherous path she took regularly. She then realized Bonnie's determination mirrored her own. Her daughter didn't want to cause worry and sought to assert her independence. Bonnie carried pepper spray, believing in her ability to fend off an assailant. Additionally, from a young age, Karen instilled in Bonnie the principle of never accepting car rides from strangers, trusting that her daughter would only accept a lift from someone familiar and trusted. When the walk yielded no clues, Karen drove around the vicinity, searching for any of Bonnie's possessions that might provide a lead in the investigation. She scoured ditches and bushes, exploring every possible hideout, yet found nothing. The onset of 1995 brought Karen to phone the sergeant overseeing Bonnie's case, directly inquiring about the possibility of her daughter having been sexually assaulted, compelling the detective to divulge the truth. Karen received permission to view her daughter's autopsy findings, with the condition of maintaining utmost confidentiality. Bonnie was indeed discovered fully clothed, and a medical examination revealed the presence of male DNA from a swab taken, along with noted injuries to her genital area. This critical information remained confidential as the source of the DNA had yet to be identified. All men with any link to Bonnie underwent questioning, and their DNA samples were collected, yet no matches had been found by that point. Witnesses reported seeing Bonnie on her way to the bus stop that morning, but none could confirm seeing her board any bus. The question then arose: how did Bonnie find herself in Chugach Park, situated more than 10 miles from her residence, and for what reason? The investigators theorized that Craig had been assaulted during her solitary walk in the darkness. Nearly a year after Bonnie's passing, Jim's family extended an invitation to him and Karen for a week-long yacht voyage, aiming to provide a change of environment. Despite Karen's reluctance due to the painful connection between sailing and her daughter's tragic end, she recognized it as a chance to temporarily escape her sorrow. Having spent the year engulfed in grief, investigation, and anticipation for any news regarding her daughter, she saw this as an opportunity for a brief respite from her worries. Karen, Jim, his brother Ken, and Ken's wife collectively relished the ocean's vistas and sounds throughout the week. Upon their return to dock, they were met with the news that the Coast Guard had been attempting to contact them regarding an emergency within their family. Karen's mind immediately raced back to the previous year's agony, fearing the worst for another one of her children. However, this time, the distressing news was directed at Jim and Ken, who learned of their father's sudden death from a heart attack. This was especially shocking as they had just celebrated his 63rd birthday, during which he appeared to be in good health. This incident marked the second time a boating trip resulted in ominous news for the family. Karen's other children faced tremendous challenges, grappling with the loss of their sister and nearly losing their mother to an all-consuming quest for justice. The investigation into Bonnie's death took precedence, leaving them without the necessary attention and care. Karen felt that abandoning her pursuit of the truth would be a betrayal to Bonnie, even as the possibility loomed that the case might remain unsolved. As the years unfolded, Karen witnessed her children maturing and welcomed the joy of becoming a grandmother. Amidst these life changes, her youngest son Adam underwent a cornea transplant to address his worsening vision, unfortunately resulting in blindness in one eye. Karen's personal life saw its own shifts. She married Jim, but after 3 years, their marriage ended in separation. The family faced further sorrows with the passing of Karen's brother and later their mother, who battled cancer. Throughout these highs and lows, the profound grief of losing Bonnie remained an indelible shadow over Karen's life. The family's ordeal was marked by countless sleepless nights, anxiety, rage, and profound depression. On January 5, 2007, 12 years after Bonnie's death, Karen embarked on a global journey with a friend. While in a hotel on a quaint island in the Philippines, an email from an unknown sender titled Bonnie caught her attention, making her heart race. The case, still officially unsolved, had been reinvigorated by a fresh investigative team. Utilizing a new database equipped with advanced technology, detectives re-examined the DNA sample found on Bonnie and matched it to a man then incarcerated in New Hampshire for a spree of armed robberies. This individual, Kenneth Dion, born in 1969 and 25 years old at Bonnie's time of death, had only recently been linked to the case after his DNA was entered into the system at the end of 2006. Dion, with a background in martial arts and accolades from competitions, had served in the U.S. Army until his discharge due to drug use. Known to carry distinctive weapons in his vehicle, such as a say, a 3-section staff, and nunchucks, Dion had a history of arrests and had been free for only a few months following a probation violation before Bonnie's tragic death. In May 2007, Kenneth Dion was indicted for the assault and homicide of Bonnie Craig. He was accused of assaulting her on her way to the bus stop, hitting her with a weapon used in martial arts, perpetrating sexual assault, and then, to conceal the evidence of his crime, discarded her body from a cliff in the park. As details about Kenneth came to light, further information surfaced, showing his lengthy criminal record with 18 convictions, including 10 misdemeanors and 8 felonies. Had Kenneth's DNA been submitted to the database sooner, the case could have been solved more quickly, Upon his extradition, Kenneth submitted numerous pretrial motions, which greatly postponed the proceedings and inflicted significant distress on Karen's family. Each court session was as though they were losing Bonnie anew, with old wounds being torn open. Eventually, after 17 years, on October 31st, 2011, Kenneth Dion received a 124-year prison sentence, 99 years for murder and 25 years for assault, with the possibility of parole at 80. Despite Bonnie's physical fitness and her possession of pepper spray, Kenneth managed to subdue her. The precise details of Bonnie's fate on that early September morning are still a mystery, yet her passing has deeply affected many around her. Bonnie's younger sister Samantha took up a role as a 911 dispatcher, while her elder brother Jason obtained a qualification as a paramedic. Karen, unable to come to terms with her daughter's loss, authored a book named Justice for Bonnie, sharing their experiences in an attempt to achieve closure and pay tribute to her daughter's memory. Rose, an octogenarian, recently became a widow, leaving her with 6 grown children and grandchildren who adored spending time with her, creating a large, joyous family unit. They frequently visited her on weekends, bringing delicious snacks, engaging in conversations, and combing her hair, all efforts aimed at making sure Rose never felt isolated. Occasionally, Rose would confuse their identities, mixing up her children with her grandchildren. On some days, she believed her deceased husband was still alive. Suffering from dementia, Rose's condition was variable. There were good days, but sometimes it seemed she was drifting further from reality. She would point towards a door at the corridor's end, insisting Rudy was there. Her grown children attempted to clarify that Rudy couldn't be there, yet Rose was adamant she had seen the young boy in that room. Rudy Farias was a teenager who had vanished in Houston 8 years prior. Nonetheless, their mother's dementia meant she sometimes couldn't grasp the reality of her statements. This incident took place in June 2023, presenting a faint possibility for further investigation into Rudy Farias' disappearance. 8 years prior, Jenny Santana's son, Rudy, vanished at 17. On the evening of March 6, 2015, he left to walk his 2 dogs. The animals returned separately to their home's front door, their leashes trailing, but Rudy was nowhere to be found. Jenny tirelessly pursued every minor lead in hopes of finding her son, to no avail. Amidst numerous recent tragedies in the Santana family, Jenny remained undeterred in her conviction that her son would be found. Speculation arose that his disappearance might be linked to his biological father. Rudy's father, a law enforcement officer, was found deceased with a gunshot wound in his patrol vehicle. Prior to this, Rudy's older brother had perished in a vehicular accident, and now Rudy himself had disappeared, leaving behind scant evidence to trace his whereabouts. Jenny, a determined mother, refused to surrender to despair. She actively engaged in online forums, keeping her son's name and case in the public eye, hoping to prevent his story from being forgotten. She theorized that his disappearance could be tied to human trafficking and criticized the state police for their inaction, suggesting a potential complicity within the law enforcement community that may be protecting criminals, thereby avoiding confrontation with powerful entities. Since she started vocally addressing the issue of human trafficking, Jenny sensed a looming threat to her safety. This apprehension was substantiated when Rudy's uncle, Jerry, met with a fatal motorcycle accident on the 2nd commemoration of his nephew's disappearance. Jerry had been dedicated to finding the young man. During the National Missing Persons Day, he delivered a heartfelt speech about Rudy's generous nature and his compassion towards others, underlining the sorrow of a mother bereft of her son. Although Jerry never explicitly stated that harm had come to Rudy shortly before his untimely demise, he reached out to the proprietor of a local social media outlet known as Voice of Houston, a platform the family often engaged with, to schedule a meeting. He purported to divulge critical information regarding Rudy's case at this meeting set for a week later. Tragically, Jerry passed away just a day before they were due to convene, hinting he might have stumbled upon sensitive details he was not supposed to uncover. With fading interest in Rudy's disappearance due to the absence of concrete evidence, Jenny, aided by volunteers and family members, crafted t-shirts adorned with her son's image and disseminated his photos online. This endeavor finally yielded results when, on the evening of June 29, 2023, a 911 emergency call reported an unconscious and injured individual outside the Immaculate Heart Church. The person, described as a young man in his 20s with minor injuries and bruises, was identified as Rudy Farias.
Upon receiving the emergency call, law enforcement officers were initially uncertain of the man's identity, given that the young man had vanished 8 years earlier and his disappearance had faded into the background amid newer, unresolved cases. As the individual slowly came to, he was mute, exhibiting signs of fear and confusion. Lacking any form of identification or wallet, a significant lead discovered in his pocket eventually led to unraveling this heinous mystery. Authorities managed to identify the man and contacted his mother, Jenny Santana, to inform her of the extraordinary discovery. Recognizing her son by his eyes, Jenny affirmed his identity and hastened to his side, remaining there continuously. After 8 years of despair, Rudy's return seemed almost miraculous to his family. Though he had not yet spoken to authorities, it was anticipated that in time, once settled, and at peace within his family's embrace, he would disclose his experiences and how he came to be found near the church, miles from his home. Rudy showed signs of physical distress, with leg ulcers, various cuts and bruises, and dried blood in his hair. Yet these injuries were treatable with care and affection. Jenny then took to her social media to express gratitude towards everyone who had kept the search for Rudy alive, acknowledging she had no new details about his whereabouts during the missing years, but was committed to supporting his recovery from the ordeal. She noted that any attempt to discuss his past led him to withdraw completely, becoming silent and adopting a fetal position. Nevertheless, Jenny expressed profound thanks for her son's return after such a lengthy absence. A constant in Rudy's life, the pendant of his late brother, remained with him. Yet, the narrative was poised for an unforeseen shift. The discovery of a credit card in the young man's pocket, issued in Jenny Santana's name just 2 years prior, was a crucial lead for the police in piecing together the enigma of his disappearance. Given Rudy's 8-year absence, the existence of a relatively recent credit card linked to his mother raised significant questions. As detectives delved into inquiries with neighbors and Jenny's family members, they unearthed intriguing information. The local community expressed their astonishment upon hearing national news reports of Rudy Farias's dramatic recovery. They were convinced they had seen him at his mother's residence not long before, unaware of any missing person case related to Jenny. The collective surprise was amplified by media narratives, especially since the young man they recognized was referred to not as Rudy but as Dolph, despite Rudy not having a twin. Neighbors consistently described Dolph as somewhat introverted yet approachable, often seen mingling in the street or joining card games in garages. Described as gentle and amiable, Dolph, however, appeared perpetually bewildered, regularly accompanied by his mother on evening walks to her workplace. Jenny seemed to promote her son's engagement with the neighbors, recommending dinner invitations or small monetary gifts as gestures of gratitude for their friendliness. Considering Rudy's complete name as Rudolph, bearing a close resemblance to Dolph, the neighbors were bewildered by how such a circumstance came to be. It was revealed that Dolph and Rudy were the same person, who had disappeared for nearly 8 years. However, the question arises, why did all the news broadcasts claim the boy had been discovered, particularly when, as per the neighbors, he hadn't vanished in the first place? If his mother knew about this, what was the reason behind her frequent participation in missing persons forums and her melancholic updates on social media? Who, indeed, is Jenny Santana? When this lady encountered her most recent spouse, she was already a mother to a boy named Rudy, while her future partner had a child from a past relationship. They were on the path to forming a large, blended family. The sons hit it off immediately. Rudy was thrilled to gain a brother, Charles, who was 8 years his senior. All seemed perfect until a year into the marriage, when the husband discovered Jenny was concurrently married to another man, marking this her 5th marital venture. It turned out, after parting ways with her previous spouse, Santana had no desire to finalize a divorce. Furthermore, she exhibited hostile behavior towards her partner. For her unlawful actions, she incurred a fine of $43,000. Additionally, her siblings initiated legal action against her for the neglect of their aging mother, Rosa, Jenny's mother, who was in her late years and struggled with dementia. The matriarch required continuous attention. While the siblings were willing to provide care, Santana persuaded their mother that staying with her and Rudy was the optimal choice. The family held affection for Jenny, but lamented the living conditions Rosa endured in the home. The environment was marked by chaos and poor hygiene. with Rosa relegated to a soiled, damp couch for sleep. The home's interior was littered with animal waste due to a lack of cleaning. There were even instances where Rosa was hospitalized due to infected bed sores. The siblings attempted to communicate with Rosa, but her cognitive abilities were impaired. Jenny showed no intention of making any adjustments, prompting them to resort to legal action against Santana for maintaining a residence that was neither clean, secure, nor appropriate for an elderly person's habitation. They alleged in court that their sister was a compulsive liar who failed to adequately look after their mutual mother. Yet, Jenny's affection for Rosa seemed anything but warm. She appeared primarily motivated by the financial benefits provided by the state for caregiving, or so her relatives suspected. At first sight, Jenny Santana presented herself as a devoted single mother. But beneath the surface, she harbored peculiar habits, including a deep fixation on social media. Her leisure time was consumed by her online presence, where she engaged in a unique form of interaction, primarily with herself. Jenny crafted multiple fake profiles to leave comments on her own uploads and engaged in elaborate dialogues across these accounts, posing questions and crafting responses as if she were multiple individuals. This charade was aimed at crafting an illusion of popularity on her social media platforms, showcasing a profile bustling with activity. Like many, Jenny had a penchant for theatrics and could escalate minor issues into dramatic episodes. On one occasion, her son Rudy experienced leg swelling. After a visit to their family physician, who confirmed the swelling was benign, Jenny nonetheless rushed him to the emergency room, urging him to claim he had ingested numerous pills in an attempt to escape a supposed cancer diagnosis. Following his hospitalization, Jenny captured and shared an image of Rudy in his hospital bed, misleading her audience into believing he was battling cancer, fearing the loss of her son. Some netizens theorized that Jenny might be exhibiting signs of Munchausen syndrome by proxy, a condition where caregivers fabricate or induce medical issues in those they care for, seeking attention and sympathy through fabricated narratives of sacrifice and suffering. However, children often exhibit traits distinct from their parents, and Rudy was a prime example of this divergence. Despite Rudy's social environment largely being composed of his mother and her numerous partners, his personality starkly contrasted with Jenny's. Rudy was innately compassionate and kind-hearted, always ready to assist others in distress, even if it was merely a stray cat. Growing up, he was notably shy, gentle, and introverted. Aside from his mother, his only genuine confidant was his cherished stepbrother Charles, who served as both a paternal figure and an elder brother to him. Rudy aspired to emulate Charles, especially when Charles chose to serve in the Marine Corps, inspiring Rudy to pursue a future in the military as well. On a fateful day, while Jenny and Rudy were at home, a phone call abruptly changed everything. Upon receiving distressing news, Jenny, in a state of panic, hurried Rudy outside. That day, Charles had been involved in a motorcycle accident close to their residence. The Farias, along with their mother, reached him before the paramedics could. At just 13, Rudy was confronted with the harrowing sight of his older brother and closest ally dying by the roadside in Houston, an experience that profoundly affected his young mind. On the first anniversary of Charles's tragic demise, Rudy, despite his young age, took to social media to articulate his sorrow. He commemorated a year since Charles had gone to be with the Lord, expressing regret over his unspoken affections for Charles. Rudy wished for nothing more than the return of his dearest friend. 3 years subsequent to Charles's passing, Rudy's biological father also died, albeit their interactions had been minimal. The father was discovered in his patrol car, a victim of suicide. As a police officer who had been dismissed for fabricating reports and unjustly issuing excessive speeding tickets for personal gain, he couldn't face the humiliation and impending legal repercussions. Engaged in this deceit for 3 years, he had accumulated over $150,000 through bogus overtime. Unable to confront the scandal and the loss of his career, he chose to end his life following his dismissal. Rudy Farias, who effectively grew up fatherless, faced the devastating reality that he would never have the opportunity to rebuild a relationship with his father, a realization that severely impacted his already vulnerable mental state. He grappled with a tumultuous mix of resentment, sorrow, and anger. By the age of 16, Rudy had already endured the loss of 2 irreplaceable figures in his life, his stepbrother and his biological father. Despite his sophisticated understanding of mourning, at his core, Rudy retained the innocence of a young boy. His relatives observed that emotionally, Farias mirrored the characteristics of a 10-year-old, equally trusting, gentle, sweet, and naively youthful. Then, Rudy vanished. Over the next 8 years, Jenny recounted the tale of his disappearance following a routine dog walk, an outing that typically lasted 15 to 20 minutes. After 2 hours had elapsed without Rudy's return, Jenny was struck by a wave of maternal fear when she heard barking at the door. Rushing to see, she found only one of the dogs, its leash trailing, having made its way back alone. She surmised that Rudy had gone in search of the other dog, leading to his delay. It wasn't until the following morning that the second dog returned, but Rudy was nowhere to be found. In a state of alarm, Jenny immediately notified the police. However, in her distressed state, she confused her son's birth date, leading the officers to mistakenly consider Farias as an adult. Consequently, their response lacked urgency, presuming the teenager had merely decided to leave home of his own accord. The search operation focused on Rudy's usual walking route, where they discovered a backpack containing notebooks and an asthma inhaler, items Jenny confirmed belonged to her son. Yet, there was no evidence to suggest any criminal activity. The detectives classified the teenager as missing, and Jenny adopted the role of a bereaved parent. She quickly produced and distributed posters featuring her son's image throughout the city, rallying the support of the police, relatives, friends, and the broader community in the search effort, who all showed empathy and offered their assistance. As time passed, the narrative of Rudy's disappearance gradually receded into the background, with shifts in law enforcement personnel and the community moving forward with their lives. Jenny stood as the sole figure steadfastly committed to the quest for her son. She established a webpage dedicated to Rudy's search, appealing to the empathy of the public, which resulted in over $2,000 in donations to aid in the effort. With the official investigation stalling over the years, Santana turned to online forums and social media to voice her concerns, sensing that something was deeply wrong. She professed a desire to journey to Reynosa, a town straddling the border between the USA and Mexico, convinced that Rudy had fallen prey to human trafficking and resolved to undertake a personal mission to rescue him. Jenny depicted the venture to relatives and friends as perilous and daunting, even initiating a fundraising campaign to finance the endeavor. Yet, those close to her viewed Reynosa as a common destination for tourists and speculated that Santana might be seeking an excuse for a brief getaway, leveraging Rudy's situation as a means to gather funds. They had previously supported her through similar endeavors, dropping everything to join her on trips whenever there were claims of Rudy sightings across the nation. Following each unsuccessful search, Santana would lament on social media about the pain of being separated from her son, beseeching guardian angels to protect him in her absence. Through her posts, she directly communicated with Rudy, expressing her profound longing for him. Simultaneously, as she crafted these sorrowful narratives, Rudy was actually at home. For 8 years, Jenny had kept him isolated, confined behind a locked door. While not physically restrained with chains, Rudy was subjected to psychological captivity, stripped of his liberty. Farias grew disillusioned with the treatment he received at home, feeling a profound disrespect for his personal boundaries. His mother consistently overstepped these limits, prompting Rudy to make the decision to flee. His attempt at liberation lasted roughly 24 hours, for by the following day, he had returned home, a detail only Jenny was privy to. It seemed the mother chose to use this episode as both a punitive measure and an opportunity to garner attention for herself. Upon his return from a walk with the dogs, after being absent for several hours, Rudy intended to apologize for the concern he caused. However, Jenny informed him that he was now the subject of a police search. She fabricated a story about him receiving a speeding ticket days prior, and, with his disappearance already reported, implied the authorities believed he was evading legal consequences. Now branded a criminal, Rudy, lacking sophistication in legal matters and trusting in the inherent truthfulness expected of a mother to her child, believed her. Thus, he spent the initial days secluded in his room, which extended into a week, then a year, under his mother's manipulative influence. Every time visitors arrived, Rudy would retreat to his room and remain utterly silent, a prisoner in his own home. Rosa, Rudy's grandmother, aware of his presence, attempted to inform her children of this fact on multiple occasions. However, Rudy's aunts and uncles dismissed her claims as the confused utterances of someone suffering from senile dementia, paying no heed to her assertions. After the case settled down, Jenny allowed her son to occasionally go out to visit neighbors, but now she called him Dolph. His missing posters displayed his photo at the age of 14. It's no wonder many didn't recognize him. His mother believed that a childhood photo would evoke more sympathy from people. Sometimes she would give her son her credit card and send him to the store for groceries or other errands. To prevent him from realizing that she was using him, she would mix forbidden substances and sedatives into his food, making him sluggish and unable to think objectively. Jenny continued to threaten him with jail and the police, so he reluctantly stayed within the confines of the family home. There were many rumors that the mother was behaving inappropriately with the adult son. She'd go into his bathroom without knocking, make Rudy lie with her under the blanket without clothes. However, the boy himself tweaked that there were some intimate moments between them. He thought his mother still treated him like a child and just played the husband. It turns out that the family also saw Rudy in town more than once and reported it to the police. Uniforms would come to Santana's house and even look inside, but without a warrant, they couldn't get inside. During this time, Jenny behaved calmly, without arousing any suspicion from the officers. The cops were leaving, and they said the lead was false. No law enforcement officer, no family member, no one could have imagined that the teenager had been living peacefully under the roof of his Owen house Elvis time, only rarely outside. After enduring 8 years of confinement at home, Rudy devised a plan. In the dead of night, he seized his mother's car keys and credit card, then stealthily departed without a clear destination in mind. Despite not having driven for 8 years, he managed only a few minutes behind the wheel before crashing the vehicle, sustaining numerous cuts and bruises in the process. Abandoning the keys in the car, Rudy proceeded on foot until he reached a church. Overwhelmed and fatigued, he collapsed, signaling his reunion with his family. Jenny, seeking sympathy, shared a photo of Rudy in a hospital bed on social media, an image from 8 years prior when he was hospitalized due to a leg tumor. Urgently, the authorities sought to transfer Farias to a hospital, but his mother persuaded them that his condition would deteriorate there, opting instead to take him home. In reality, she feared Rudy would divulge the truth once fully conscious.
On July 5, 2023, Rudy finally found the courage to speak, confiding only in a local activist named Quanell X, known for championing the rights of discrimination victims. Quan assisted individuals in bringing attention to their cases through media coverage and negotiations with law enforcement. Despite Jenny's persistent interference during the conversation, Rudy managed to convey his version of events. Eventually, it became apparent that Jenny's presence was hindering the discussion, and she was asked to leave the room. During their conversation, signs of self-harm on Rudy's body were observed, indicating the toll of his confinement. Despite his discomfort sharing a bed with his mother, Rudy emphasized his enduring love for her as a son. Quanell publicly stated that a mother who committed such acts should be held accountable for her crimes, expressing astonishment that Santana remained free from handcuffs. Rudy Farias' narrative deeply affected him. However, later that same night, Rudy returned home with his mother. Jenny resorted to emotional manipulation, threatening self-harm unless Rudy recanted his story to the police. Unaware that their conversation was being recorded, Santana continued to adhere to her fabricated account. During a press conference, the police declared their decision not to press charges against Jenny at this time, citing a lack of concrete evidence of her wrongdoing. Rudy is presently residing with a family acquaintance. Yet, the extent to which his mother might employ additional manipulations to regain custody of her son and seek further attention from social media remains uncertain. The International Center for Missing and Exploited Children, which operates globally, reports that hundreds of thousands of minors are reported missing annually, with parents frequently implicated in their disappearances. This tale begins in the eastern region of Australia, within Sydney, a thriving city inhabited by slightly more than 5 million individuals. Roughly 15 miles to the southwest of its borders is the unassuming neighborhood of Lugarno, housing a close-knit community of around 5,000 people. It is in this locale that the journey of Melissa Grimley, more famously known as KTK, commenced. She would eventually transform into a persona that could instill fear in the hearts of anyone who had ever interacted with her. Melissa Louise was brought into the world on April 21, 1971, to Barbara and Ted Grimley. Her early years were filled with ease. Her father was employed by an insurance firm, and her mother worked as a physiotherapist. The Grimleys were part of the middle-class community, and her parents actively participated in the Lions Club, striving to support their local area. Melissa was a typical, inconspicuous child. She struggled academically but developed an early love for fashion. Upon completing high school, Grimley pursued secretarial and business studies at Patrick's College in Sydney. Her initial role was as an administrator within the National Road Association's investment sector. Melissa harbored a deep fascination with finance. One night in 1992, the young lady decided to go out for a drink to relax following a hectic week. What started as one drink quickly became several, during which Grimley's attention was captured by the handsome features of a man seated close by. She was utterly captivated, only to regain her composure a few months later when she found herself without a penny. The man had exhausted her credit cards and taken numerous valuable objects from her residence. Grimley was left feeling utterly drained, but gleaned an important insight from the ordeal. Money and confidence, when entrusted to the unscrupulous, can result in dire outcomes. The lesson Melissa learned, however, would eventually not be employed to the advantage of others. In 1998, the ambitious professional landed a job as an office administrator at a Sydney-based branch of an investment bank. She was charged with managing substantial amounts of money, and despite having tasted the bitterness of financial misfortune herself, she proved to be no different from her former boyfriend. Within 6 months of her tenure, it was unveiled that Melissa had embezzled $2,000 from the company by falsifying the manager's signature on multiple checks. When the corporate headquarters became aware of the financial misconduct, rather than pressing charges and exposing the security lapse, they allowed her to voluntarily resign, avoiding police involvement. Furthermore, they didn't demand the return of the misappropriated funds, deeming the sum too insignificant to warrant public fuss. In an effort to divert her attention from the sour departure, Melissa turned to her private life. She encountered a British man named Tony Caddick, and by April 2000, the couple had wed. Melissa also dedicated herself to weight loss and staying in shape, engaging a personal trainer. Through this connection, she encountered various clients, including a highly esteemed financial advisor. This individual was a high-ranking official at a currency and finance firm in need of a new office manager. Naturally, Melissa seized every opportunity to stand out. Their friendship blossomed quickly, and she was subsequently recruited for the open role within his team. Diligently focusing on her role, Melissa thrived in her new duties, swiftly discerning which risks were judicious to take and which to eschew. By 2002, Caddick had amassed sufficient funds to contribute a $750,000 investment in the firm, subsequently gaining ownership of 25% of the company's equity. Melissa Caddick's achievements were so impactful and prosperous that she was featured on the cover of the sector's publication, Independent Financial Advisor, where she was lauded as wise choice, best practice planning in Australia. In the magazine, she cautioned against financial pyramids and assorted scam operations, urging investors to verify the credentials of their financial advisors, their qualifications, and their commitment to ethical standards. This prudent counsel would later take on a note of irony, as a year thereafter, Melissa found herself disenchanted with her constructive influence and aspired to diversify her investments into real estate and the stock market. Nonetheless, her employer maintained stringent policies and rebuffed her aspirations. Following a particularly intense disagreement, Caddick departed from the company in 2004, reclaiming her $750,000 investment. The abrupt shift in circumstances led Melissa and her husband Tony to relocate to England, where he had previously resided before their move to Australia. By the summer of 2006, leveraging Melissa's prior financial successes, the pair established themselves in a picturesque residence in Essex, to the northeast of London. Tony achieved his qualification as a lawyer and landed a distinguished position, a milestone that coincided with the joyous arrival of their son, symbolizing the family's pinnacle of achievement. Yet, transitioning to a new country, altering their lifestyle entirely, and even the joy of becoming parents, failed to fulfill Melissa.
With Tony frequently commuting long hours between Essex and London for work, Melissa often found herself isolated at home. It might have been prudent for Melissa to seek employment. However, she instead allowed her attention to drift towards other men, culminating in Tony's discovery of her affair with a former acquaintance a few months later. This individual was, in fact, Melissa's personal hairdresser from Sydney, named Anthony Coletti, a charismatic and handsome man. Melissa covertly expended funds to whisk her paramour away to various European cities, indulging in new experiences under the guise of attending financial conferences to stay abreast of industry innovations. Tony, unwilling to condone his wife's betrayal, confronted her. Rather than offering an apology or admitting her wrongdoing, Melissa responded with fury, attributing her indiscretions to her husband's shortcomings. The confrontation nearly escalated to physical violence, prompting Tony to withdraw to his parents' place to de-escalate the tension, leaving Melissa and their son behind. Upon his return a few days later, he discovered Melissa, their child, most of the household's furnishings, and all their jointly held funds were gone. Melissa had effectively plundered their assets, liquidating their furnishings and apparel, and absconded back to Sydney with their son. Once back in her native country, she initiated a campaign of defamation against her husband, portraying him as the adulterer, a compulsive liar, a harsh individual, and a negligent father, though these accusations remained largely unsubstantiated. Shortly after her return to Australia in January 2012, Melissa swiftly reconnected with her new partner, Anthony Coletti. She also took control of the property in England and sold it, netting a whopping $1.3 million from the sale. With these funds, Melissa established a lavish lifestyle, settling into a sprawling residence featuring 5 bedrooms and 5 bathrooms, located in the Rose Bay vicinity. It was in this setting that Melissa Caddick's operation of a financial pyramid scheme officially commenced. Throughout her life, Melissa harbored aspirations of substantial wealth, yet her financial dealings frequently led to adverse outcomes. An early betrayal by a deceitful lover imparted a cunning lesson on the ease of manipulating money and trust when in nefarious hands. Leveraging these insights, Caddick commenced her deceitful practices, ranging from signature forgery on checks to ultimately leaving her husband utterly destitute. Melissa was unscrupulous in exploiting others for financial gain, quickly growing weary of monotony. She deliberated on ways to fulfill her ambitions, and a grand scheme began to crystallize in her thoughts. This concept was not new to her. She had entertained it for an extended period, but had not previously acted upon it. By this juncture, Caddick had amassed considerable wealth, yet she harbored no intentions of ceasing her pursuits. Dismissing the notion of profiting from merely a handful of individuals as trivial, she crafted an elaborate strategy designed to captivate a vast audience. In 2012, Melissa set her elaborate fraud into motion, ironically betraying the advice she once dispensed on a magazine cover about verifying financial advisors' credentials. She deceitfully portrayed herself as a financial advisor to her acquaintances and relatives, assuring them that investments with her would yield substantial legal returns. She enticed investors with promises of remarkable profits, despite lacking the necessary accreditation or expertise. Upon receiving funds, Caddick fabricated trading account screenshots and dispatched bogus monthly profit reports via email, displaying gains of 10, 20, or even 30%. These fabricated successes bolstered investors' confidence in Melissa, prompting them to either increase their investments or refer new clients to her. Caddick's bank balance swiftly escalated from thousands to millions as she swindled friends, ex-colleagues, her personal trainer, family members, and even her parents. Her spending became increasingly flamboyant and excessive, squandering her illicit gains on luxury automobiles, high-end fashion, art, and jewelry. She extravagantly expended over $48,000 on Chanel products, $275,000 on international travel, $229,000 at Dior, and more than $25,000 on protein shakes alone, all while maintaining an air of affluence that was unbeknownst to her family and friends, financed by their own losses. To cultivate an aura of exclusivity around her business, Melissa falsely informed potential investors that her ledger was full, only to later entice them with offers of supposedly newly available slots if they acted swiftly. By the year 2014, Melissa had purchased a lavish property on Orlando Road for upwards of $6 million. This luxurious mansion boasted stunning views of the Sydney Harbour Bridge, featuring expansive living areas, a swimming pool, and a large dining space with a panoramic view of the city. In 2016, she gifted her then-husband, Anthony Coletti, an Audi R8 valued at $390,000, personalized with a license plate representing his music label, marking his ventures as a musician and hobbyist DJ. Additionally, Melissa herself owned several high-priced vehicles. Since 2009, Melissa embarked on 25 international trips, exploring destinations ranging from the ski resorts of Aspen to secluded islands in the South Pacific, all financed by her circle of family and friends. Melissa's parents liquidated their family residence, located in southern Sydney, and entrusted the proceeds to their daughter for the purchase of a penthouse in Edgecliff, with the agreement they would retain a lifetime right to live there. Contrarily, KTK listed the apartment solely under her name and diverted the funds towards purchasing a diamond valued at $590,000, among other personal expenditures. Melissa not only unscrupulously ascended to wealth, but also lavished millions annually on fulfilling her materialistic desires, enjoying stays at exclusive retreats, traveling on private jets, and affording any luxury she fancied. For a duration of 8 years, Melissa's elaborate financial pyramid scheme persisted without retribution. She managed a Ponzi scheme, generating returns for early investors with the capital from new investors. Through her deceit, KTK amassed approximately 30 million Australian dollars. However, as all things inevitably conclude, Melissa was acutely aware of this reality. She simply chose to disregard it. The foundation of her deceptive operations began to show signs of instability in 2019, when the Australian Securities and Investments Commission, ASIC, was tipped off that KTK was operating as a financial advisor without the requisite licensing. Initially, this revelation did not lead to immediate action, but by June 2020, the situation garnered serious attention from investigators. It was uncovered that KTK indeed lacked an Australian financial services license and had been illegitimately using the credentials of a previous colleague and friend by fraudulently adding her own name to the documents. This discovery gave the Commission ample cause for alarm, especially since KTK had by then deceitfully extracted approximately 30 million Australian dollars from her clients. Authorities initiated rigorous surveillance of Melissa, meticulously documenting each of her transactions over the following months. This thorough investigation eventually culminated in the gathering of conclusive evidence of her fraudulent activities. On November 10, 2020, the regulatory body took decisive action by freezing Melissa's assets and seizing her passport. The subsequent day witnessed a search operation at KTK's opulent mansion, appraised at over $6 million. During the raid, KTK appeared visibly anxious, her behavior indicating an acute awareness of the precariousness of her situation, as the lavish lifestyle she had been leading was imminently threatened. Given the gravity of the fraudulent charges against her, she was potentially facing a significant prison sentence. Thus, it was hardly unexpected when, in the dawn hours of the day following the asset freeze and property search, KTK vanished without a trace. On the brisk morning of November 12, 2020, before the first light of dawn, Melissa quietly arose from her bed, dressed in her running attire, and silently exited the bedroom while Anthony remained asleep. She slipped into her sneakers and made her way to the front door. As she left the house, the soft click of the door was heard by her 14-year-old son, marking the last moment she was seen. Anthony reported his wife missing at 11:30 a.m. the following day, a full 30 hours after she vanished. The news of her disappearance triggered an intensive investigation by detectives who, in light of her recently uncovered fraudulent schemes, found her sudden absence highly suspect. The Australian Securities and Investments Commission, ASIC, already scrutinizing her for financial deception, viewed her disappearance amidst spreading rumors of her fraud among investors with great suspicion. A week passed with no leads, plunging Melissa's family into deep anguish. They made public pleas through the media, urging her to come forward or at least signal that she was safe. The gravity of her actions weighed heavily, having defrauded millions from not just any individuals, but from some significantly influential figures, alongside her own friends and family. These investors were all too aware of the lavish manner in which Melissa had misappropriated their investments. They knew her residence, intensifying the mystery of her whereabouts. Questions arose whether Melissa had chosen to vanish on her own accord, or if retribution from a scorned investor had befallen her. Investigators initiated their search by scrutinizing Melissa's telephone records, discovering no subsequent activity post her disappearance. Crucial belongings such as her phone and keys were left behind in her home. Additionally, her banking activities ceased, propelling the officers to examine local CCTV footage from the day she vanished. Despite their efforts, Melissa was not captured on any camera, indicating she might have exited the vicinity in a private vehicle or was possibly escorted away by someone else. An alternative hypothesis considered was that Melissa had not traveled far and opted to conceal herself in proximity, though this notion was deemed improbable. Amidst growing desperation, some conjectured that Melissa might have succumbed to despair, contemplating suicide by plunging into the ocean from the jagged cliffs, nearly 900 feet from her residence. However, Anthony, along with other intimates, staunchly believed Melissa would not abandon her son, especially when faced with allegations that, albeit serious, might result in only a modest prison term or a hefty fine at most. This belief in her unwillingness to forsake her son led to the swift rejection of the suicide theory by her acquaintances and subsequently by the authorities, especially in the absence of any physical evidence or discovery of her body. The authorities broadened their search to encompass the entire Australian territory, as KTK's travel document had been seized, rendering her unable to depart the country through legal means. Owing to the peculiarities of the case, information about Melissa's vanishing spread rapidly, not only within Australia but also abroad. Sightings of the woman were reported in Brisbane, Melbourne, and even Darwin. Now, with her identity known to millions, Melissa found herself with no place to conceal herself. The officials anticipated that KTK would eventually come forward on her own. This situation persisted until 101 days later, the ocean ominously brought a ghastly item to the shore. On February 21, 2021, a pair of beachgoers picking up litter along Burnda Beach on the coast of New South Wales spotted a gray sneaker from afar. Upon closer inspection, they realized it was attached to a foot, which was emitting a foul smell, with its contents decomposed and discolored. The sneaker, having washed ashore just hours earlier, contained a human foot and aligned with the size and characteristics of Melissa's shoes. As forensic experts embarked on DNA verification, oceanographic scientists delved into analyzing the Tasman Sea's coastal currents to figure out how this morbid discovery ended up on Burnda Beach, 250 miles away from the KTK household. A week following the find of the human remains, DNA testing confirmed a match with samples obtained from Melissa's toothbrush. Family members also recognized the sneaker as that of the vanished woman. Despite the confirmation of Melissa's foot being found, there was widespread conjecture on whether she was deceased or still alive. Many speculated it was a strategy to elude punishment from swindled investors, as her spouse, relatives, and acquaintances concurred she would not end her own life. This led to speculation about whether another party was involved in Melissa's vanishing. KTK had defrauded numerous investors, absconding with their life savings. It's conceivable that one of these individuals sought vengeance, or perhaps it was a collaborator of hers, someone desiring to stay hidden and dodge incarceration. Melissa's life was disintegrating before her very eyes. Being apprehended meant the loss of her wealth, liberty, companionships, and her entire family. It's difficult to ascertain her thoughts that fateful morning. Could an epiphany have compelled her to leap from a cliff? The state of Melissa's foot, severely decomposed, led many experts to argue the improbability of it staying intact after 100 days in the ocean, prompting speculations of a contrived scenario. Ironically, KTK was familiar with the beach, having spent numerous summer vacations there during her youth. Some theorize she might have severed her own foot and placed it there as a misdirection, a theory that continues to spark heated discussions. Anthony Coletti admitted his unawareness of his wife's financial deceit, believing their lifestyle was funded by legitimate means. Rumors circulated that KTK had taken loans to invest in cryptocurrency, hoping to settle her debts with investors before vanishing, pondering over strategies to evade detection and emerge unharmed. With no fresh leads or evidence forthcoming, Melissa KTK was officially declared dead, and the process of liquidating her estate commenced. To Anthony's dismay, his $390,000 vehicle was sold at auction to offer partial restitution to some investors, along with other assets. Despite the circumstances, the Dover Heights mansion technically remained under KTK's name. As Anthony argued, he required the funds to care for Melissa's child. He also claimed his bank account held merely $1.95, depending solely on the allowance provided by the security firm managing Melissa's seized assets.
In May 2022, the federal court ordered Anthony Coletti to leave the mansion, and by October, the property was put up for auction. Subsequently, Melissa's collection of designer attire, art pieces, high-end goods, and jewelry was sold off. The revenue generated was allocated to partially offset the investors' losses, yet numerous defrauded parties ended up with nothing. Some had invested their entire retirement funds, while others liquidated their enterprises in the hope of emulating the affluence Melissa KTK had projected. She had enticed them with visions of a lavish lifestyle and success, mirroring her own purported achievements. Anthony, who had taken up amateur DJing, dedicated himself to producing a music album centered on Melissa's mysterious disappearance. He contended that his wife was unjustly maligned and deemed the entire search operation as unlawful. Nonetheless, investigators remain puzzled about why he delayed reporting his wife missing and ponder his potential involvement in her disappearance. The saga of Melissa KTK, the Australian who orchestrated her own financial empire, continues to be a puzzle. Her narrative has inspired numerous podcasts and even a television miniseries. The enduring question remains, what truly befell Melissa? Did a surge of guilt propel her to her doom? Was she a victim of someone's vengeance for her deceit? Or might KTK still be alive, discreetly enjoying life on a distant island? Only time may reveal the actuality of these events. Brett was unaware that his departure for a 3-month business journey would inadvertently place his family in significant peril. Would there be anyone to welcome him back? The saga of the Anderson family gained international attention. The Anderson family epitomized the quintessential American household. Tina and Brett Anderson, the dedicated parents, worked tirelessly to ensure a comfortable life for their children, Ethan and Hannah. Ethan was fond of fishing, racing, video games, and spending time with his peers. Meanwhile, Hannah Anderson, a typical 16-year-old from California, embraced dancing, social media, and cheerleading. Like many of her age, she remained oblivious to the world's concerns, never imagining harm could come to her or her loved ones. Unbeknownst to them, a sinister observer lay in wait, ready to pounce when least expected. Tina had previously been married briefly before meeting Brett, following her first marriage's dissolution. She was vivacious, with a passion for dance and fitness, always on the lookout for thrilling activities and a significant other to share her adventures. Brett, intelligent, diligent, affable, and generous, instantly connected with Tina, and their friendship quickly blossomed into romance. Brad was employed in the telecom sector at the time. Their union was sealed, and by autumn 1996, they were expecting their first child. The Andersons' home, a 3-bedroom, 2-bath townhouse, buzzed with anticipation from friends and family for the arrival of Brad and Tina's daughter, making the event momentous for all involved. Hannah Marie Anderson arrived on July 22, 1997, a true delight with her striking blue eyes and fair hair. Her birth was a celebratory milestone for the Andersons and their circle. The couple often hosted loved ones for barbecues and celebrations, fostering a tight-knit sense of community. Brett's best friend, James DiMaggio, affectionately known as Uncle Jim, was deeply integrated into their lives, joining Brett for numerous outdoor adventures. While Hannah initially joined her dad and Uncle Jim, she later gravitated towards spending more time with her mother and friends, leaving Ethan to accompany the men. Born on October 8, 2004, Ethan reveled in learning sports and fishing with his dad, showing early signs of being a brave and charming boy. Jim DiMaggio, amidst a challenging divorce, found solace and support with the Andersons, reflecting their innate kindness and propensity to aid those in need. In 2009, Jim acquired a property of his own, nestled in the serene Mountain Empire area, southeast of San Diego, California, roughly an hour away from where the Anderson family resided. The residence was a picturesque two-story log cabin, complete with a detached three-car garage. With fewer than 400 inhabitants in the vicinity, the locale was essentially rural, making it an ideal spot for a hunting retreat. Once his home was fully equipped and decorated, Jim invited Brett, Tina, and their kids to use it as a getaway whenever they wished. During this period, Brett was heavily invested in his work to support his family, resulting in his frequent absence from home. Tina, too, was occupied with her job and the upbringing of their children. Hannah had blossomed into a typical teenager, craving independence and hardly ever seen without her phone, a staple in her social media-driven life. Despite his busy schedule, Brett was vigilant in ensuring his daughter steered clear of undesirable influences and remained within his protective reach. Hannah's closest companion was Marissa Chavez. The duo shared numerous similarities and were virtually inseparable, both reveling in dance, cheerleading, hairstyling, dressing fashionably, applying makeup, and chatting about boys. They thrived on being the center of attention. Hannah was intelligent, daring, joyful, and outgoing. She epitomized a spirit free of worries. Brett and Tina encouraged their daughter's journey towards greater independence. Alongside her own interests, Hannah dedicated time to coaching younger cheerleaders and bonding with her brother. By 2013, Hannah was navigating her sophomore year in high school in Lakeside, while Ethan was enrolled in Linda Lake Elementary School. Around this time, Brett faced challenges at work, prompting a search for new employment opportunities. In April, he landed a promising job offer, albeit one that necessitated extended time away from home. After a discussion with Tina, they agreed to seize this opportunity. Brett embarked on his journey to Tennessee, committing as a caring father to return for Hannah's 16th birthday celebration, an occasion he refused to miss. With Brett away, Tina leaned more on their network of friends and family for support. Jim DiMaggio, despite grappling with his own financial woes and the imminent risk of foreclosure on his house, offered assistance, considering a move to Texas as a potential solution. Nonetheless, Brett's absence didn't hinder Jim's involvement with the Anderson family. He frequently transported Hannah and Ethan to their activities, engaged them in entertaining activities, effectively becoming a secondary paternal figure. Additionally, he opened his home for Hannah and her friends as a hangout spot, offering a break from parental supervision. Jim established clear boundaries: no boys, no access to his bedroom, and overlooked other minor transgressions to ensure a safe environment for the teenagers. While Brett was away in Tennessee, the absence of his family weighed heavily on him. He made it a point to call them every other day, eager to catch up and ensure their well-being. Brett also kept in touch with Jim, briefing him on his new professional challenges and entrusting him with the safety and support of Tina and their children. In the mornings, Tina would drop Hannah off at the lively cheerleading gym, where she dedicated her time to mentoring younger enthusiasts. Come 4 p.m., Tina was expected to pick Hannah up and bring her back home. Hannah, having wrapped up her coaching session, waited outside, anticipating the drive home to reconnect with Marissa, who was anxiously awaiting a message from her that unfortunately never arrived. Around 8 p.m. on a Sunday, a call was made to the San Diego County Sheriff's Office by a local from the Mountain Empire community,
reporting a residence ablaze. The fire consumed not only the main house, but also a smaller structure nearby. Firefighting teams exerted all efforts to douse the flames, yet the fire raged beyond immediate control. In a town of modest size, this incident was notably significant. Nonetheless, this fire was merely the precursor to a more grim series of discoveries. The upper story of the dwelling had completely caved in. Additionally, a gray SUV parked in the vicinity was caught in the conflagration. It took the firefighters close to 2 hours to subdue the fire. Despite the fire station's proximity, merely a 3-minute drive away, it was only after the flames were tamed that the firemen commenced a thorough inspection of the remnants to check for occupants. As they surveyed beyond the main structure to the smaller adjacent building, a firefighter spotted an anomaly, a strip of green tarp. A closer examination revealed 2 legs protruding from the entrance of the detached garage, with a body underneath the tarp, face downwards, the upper portion melded with the tarpaulin, obscuring immediate identification of gender. The fire's intensity in this section was lesser, yet sufficient to fuse the tarp to the victim's hair, skin, and skull. The scene beneath the body, smeared with a significant quantity of blood, indicated a pre-fire struggle. The attire and hair suggested a female victim, whose demise was clearly under sinister circumstances. Rope bindings around her figure, duct tape wound multiple times around her mouth and neck, and her ankles tied with white plastic rope suggested restraint. Adjacent to the woman's remains was a sleeping bag, under which lay a small brown dog, seemingly shot. The burnt SUV's license plate traced back to Tina Anderson, leading to the grim assumption that her remains were discovered in the garage. The arrival of the medical examiner led to the uncovering of a grievous throat injury on turning the body over. The news shattered Brett upon receiving a call from the police, informing him of Tina's death under violent conditions. The revelation left Anderson reeling, unable to grasp the brutal fate met by his wife in the garage, potentially alongside his best friend, amidst unknown whereabouts of Jim and his children. Brett's sense of powerlessness was profound, tormented by his absence during his family's time of need. Learning that the dog involved was Callie, their cherished family pet, compounded the horror, making it unfathomable that such cruelty could be inflicted on Tina and Callie. Upon initiating their investigation, detectives discovered that the victim, Tina Anderson, a 42-year-old woman, had a 16-year-old daughter named Hannah and an 8-year-old son, Ethan, both of whom were missing. The charred residence was owned by a close family acquaintance, 40-year-old James DiMaggio, who had also vanished, along with his blue Nissan bearing California license plates. Brett immediately boarded the earliest flight to San Diego. Although he was reluctant to cast suspicion on his best friend, the fact that Tina's body was found in his garage, and both children and Jim were unaccounted for, along with his vehicle, left him with little choice. Despite Anderson's reluctance to consider other theories, the police combed the vicinity of Jim's home, while neighbors recounted sightings of Tina, Ethan, and the family dog entering his residence the evening prior. Jim had hosted a farewell party that night before his planned move to Texas. Concurrently in California, the Amber Alert system was activated, a national mechanism for broadcasting child abduction notices. The community rapidly rallied on social media to disseminate the alert. Marissa, Hannah's closest friend, along with other schoolmates, spearheaded the distribution of flyers in the local area, clinging to the hope that Hannah and Ethan would be safely recovered. Nevertheless, during a meticulous examination of Jim's incinerated home, fire investigators stumbled upon a ghastly find: another cadaver, severely charred. This victim was identified as a child, believed to be Ethan. Upon receiving this dreadful news, Brett was initially in disbelief. However, the realization that his young friend would never return home overwhelmed him, leading to a breakdown. Clinging to the hope that Hannah might still be alive became his sole consolation. Brett had already endured the loss of his wife, son, and even their beloved pet. The thought of also losing his daughter was unbearable. If Jim had abducted Hannah following his actions towards Tina and Ethan, she was in grave peril. To pinpoint their whereabouts, detectives questioned every known associate, friend, and relative of both Hannah and Jim. Jim, who had been a cornerstone in the family and a constant in Hannah's life since her birth, treating her as if she were his own, was beyond reproach in the eyes of the extensive Anderson network. The prevailing theory among many was that an outsider had inflicted harm and abducted them, though no one could conjecture on the identity of such a person. By August 5th, both DiMaggio and Hannah remained untraceable, their phones inactive. Media outlets circulated their images along with detailed profiles, appealing to the public to report any sightings. California's alert system was fully operational, with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children ready to broadcast alerts nationwide. With no alternative suspects, Jim DiMaggio was the focal point of the investigation. The discovery of several trash bags filled with new camping gear in the attic, linked to the garage, hinted at preparations for survival in the wilderness. The find included a camping stove, the remains of a hunting knife's packaging, and a box of handcuffs, intensifying the belief that Jim had escaped with Hannah to a secluded spot, possibly aiming for Mexico or Canada. The search also uncovered explosives, gasoline containers, a tarp, and numerous letters from Hannah that Jim had preserved for undisclosed reasons. The specifics of these letters were kept confidential by the authorities. The investigation sought to unravel Jim's motives for possibly abducting Hannah. It soon emerged that the fire was set deliberately, involving an explosive mechanism with detonators, indicating premeditation. Jim's acquaintances confirmed his proficiency in outdoor survival, suggesting he might be evading capture in the wilderness with Hannah. The case garnered international attention in 2013, leading to a global search for the teenager. At a press conference, Brett directly addressed Jim DiMaggio, pleading for his daughter's release. He implored his once close friend to spare Hannah, having already taken so much from him. The inquiry revealed surveillance footage from the Pine Valley checkpoint, a mere 22 minutes from Jim's residence, capturing Jim's vehicle with Hannah visibly seated next to him. This sighting on August 4th, prior to the fire but after Hannah's last known appearance, offered a glimmer of hope for her well-being. By the time DiMaggio had collected Hannah from middle school at 4 p.m., their phones were already switched off, despite a record of 13 calls between them up to that point. The media speculated wildly about a possible pact between Jim and Hannah, fueled by the discovery of her letters in his attic and their shared outings. Marissa recounted a telling incident to investigators, describing a car ride where Jim expressed discomfort over their teenage banter, confessing his deep affection for Hannah in a manner suggesting he wished for a relationship with her if circumstances were different. This narrative painted Jim as deeply infatuated, possibly driven to extreme measures as Hannah grew older and began distancing herself. The theory posited that Jim's actions, including the arson, were motivated by a desire to isolate Hannah completely. Tina's untimely demise might have been collateral, possibly witnessing a compromising situation between Jim and Hannah, making her an obstacle to Jim's delusional aspirations. A significant development in the investigation unfolded in Idaho on Wednesday, August 7th. The day prior, a group consisting of a former sheriff, Mark John, aged 71, his spouse, and another couple, all seasoned in navigating challenging terrains, went horseback riding in the remote reaches of the Boise National Forest, specifically an area known as the River of No Return. It was there they stumbled upon two peculiar hikers, an adult male and a young female. The duo stood out for their unsuitable attire for the wilderness setting. The girl appeared to be in pajamas and tennis shoes, and the man donned a gray sweatshirt with sneakers, neither equipped with rain gear. Their campsite was ill-chosen, located on a ridge devoid of water sources, signaling their inexperience with hiking. The encounter was marked by the man's protective gesture, pulling the girl close, and their deliberate avoidance of interaction, underscored by the presence of a cat the girl held, adding to their oddity in such a setting. Unbeknownst to the riders at the time, these were the very individuals at the center of a nationwide search. Only after returning home and catching a news report on Jim and Hannah did the realization dawn on them, prompting an immediate alert to law enforcement. This clue was pivotal, especially since a cat had been part of DiMaggio's household. a shared pet between Hannah and him, missing post the fire tragedy. On Friday, a substantial force of law enforcement personnel converged on Cascade, Idaho, targeting the vicinity of the River of No Return. This terrain, unreachable by vehicle, spans millions of hectares filled with dense forests, towering mountains, and deep gullies, effectively cutting off any cell phone signal, a perfect haven for evading detection. The search team, composed of state police, FBI agents, and local law enforcement, meticulously scoured over 400 miles of this harsh landscape. Amidst a camouflage of branches, leaves, and assorted natural cover, they located a blue Nissan, conspicuously without its license plates. However, the vehicle was quickly identified as belonging to DiMaggio. By Saturday, August 10, 2013, an aerial reconnaissance mission by a U.S. Marshals Service aircraft over the forest north of Morche Lake led to a breakthrough. The crew identified a two-person blue tent and two individuals beside the lake, one man disrobing his shirt and a female figure close by. During the flyover, the pilot observed the woman signaling desperately with a piece of fabric, aiming to catch the attention of the plane above. This pair was none other than Jim DiMaggio and Hannah Anderson, marking a pivotal moment in the search operation. The FBI's hostage rescue squad positioned themselves stealthily on the terrain, biding their time to retrieve Hannah from her abductor. Timing was of the essence. As dusk approached and the shadows lengthened, the squad made their move. Jim ventured into the forest to collect more wood for the fire, and Hannah, spotting her rescuers, dashed towards them. DiMaggio, catching sight of his escaping hostage, discharged his weapon, leading the squad to respond in kind. Jim was hit by multiple bullets, succumbing to his injuries. Upon reaching safety, Hannah appeared unharmed but was visibly shaken. She grasped onto the agents, her gaze fixed and her frame quivering. The rescue team promptly flew her to a nearby hospital for immediate evaluation and to reunite her with her father, who had rushed to Idaho. Before Brett's arrival, the FBI disclosed to Hannah the tragic news that her mother and brother had also fallen victim to the crime, perishing in the blaze. Following this, Hannah was prepared to share her account with the authorities. With Jim now deceased, corroborating the exact events became impossible. Hannah recounted that everything began on August 3rd, when Jim organized a goodbye gathering before his departure to Texas. Tina, Ethan, and their dog visited his home, while Hannah herself wished to skip this final encounter. Fearing the potential damage to the long-standing friendship between her parents and DiMaggio, she kept silent about Jim's messages to her on social media, where he veiled his emotions with purported concern. Discovering that Jim, not her mother, was coming to pick her up made her feel sick. In the vehicle, Jim struggled to locate where he was supposed to meet her, prompting Hannah to call him multiple times to direct him. Their interaction was lighthearted, filled with laughter and jokes. Yet upon entering DiMaggio's residence, Hannah noticed the absence of her mother and brother, despite their belongings being scattered around, including her mother's purse with money and cards strewn about. Sensing something amiss, her alarm grew as DiMaggio presented her with handcuffs. The Jim she knew, a longtime family friend, seemed unrecognizable, his eyes void of emotion, as if possessed. He reassured her that Tina and Ethan were safe in the garage with the dog and urged her not to worry. After forcing Hannah to ingest several pills, she eventually lost consciousness. Awakening in Jim's car amidst Red Bull cans signified a night spent driving. Shortly after, she passed out again, believed to have been sedated with a sleeping medication. Hannah described to investigators Jim's threats of retribution if she attempted to signal anyone, instilling fear of making any attempt in the forest. Jim monitored her closely, even during moments requiring privacy. Escape seemed implausible. The rain, her inappropriate attire for prolonged forest exposure, and the pain from carrying a heavy backpack deterred her. Unfamiliar with survival in the wilderness, she felt utterly hopeless. However, seizing an opportunity when Jim was obscured by trees, she signaled to a passing Marshals Service plane. The narrative questioned why Hannah was in pajamas after being at school, leaving this detail unexplained. Following several days in the hospital, she returned to San Diego with her father. The circumstances surrounding the shootout that culminated in her rescue remained undisclosed, sparking public speculation and critique, with some questioning Hannah's decisions and others offering support. The Anderson family faced the challenge of shielding Hannah from intrusive media. This tale left many pondering unanswered questions. Despite his immense loss, Brett Anderson remained a pillar of strength, finding comfort in witnessing his daughter's continued growth and pursuit of a fulfilling life. The holiday is over, yet its reverberations linger in the souls of the Hutchings family. Halloween stands as the sole evening annually when creatures benignly wander amongst us. It's an occasion where all don costumes and masks, embarking on a playful venture. But consider if beneath one of those disguises lurks a genuinely malevolent being, intent on transforming nightmares into actuality. Nicole Marie Hutchings, affectionately called Nikki by her close ones, was born in San Francisco, California, on the 15th of June, 1983. Her biological father was replaced by a stepfather, James Hutchings, yet their bond was so profound it mirrored that of a natural father and daughter. From her early years, James nurtured Nicole as if she were his own, earning the endearing title Dad from her. As time passed, 2 additional children, Amanda and Timothy, were welcomed into the Hutchings fold. Following James's departure from the Marine Corps in 1987, he, along with his spouse Robin, chose to bring up their offspring in a more serene setting. They relocated to Bend, Oregon, where Nikki experienced her first snowfall. Nestled in the core of Oregon's Cascade Mountains, Bend boasted an idyllic blend of outdoor adventures, including skiing, mountain biking, and trekking, alongside a flourishing arts community, replete with a dynamic arts scene, a burgeoning craft beer sector, and an array of gastronomic venues. This juxtaposition is evident in the town's scenery, where quaint brick edifices and verdant tree-fringed avenues grace the downtown district, and at a distance, lofty pines and rugged mountain summits prevail. It was in this locale that the Hutchings clan found their home, settling into an idyllic 3-bedroom, 2-bath residence perched along the Deschutes River's edge, with the river flowing directly into their backyard, presenting endless fishing prospects. Once, Nikki's parents brought the young girl to Drake Park, a favorite among the city's green spaces, renowned for its array of events throughout the year, including musical evenings and open-air cinema showings. It also served as an ideal spot for tranquil nature strolls. It was in this setting that Nikki, upon seeing duck sculptures for the first time and struggling with her early speech, affectionately dubbed her grandfather Grandpa Duck. As Nikki matured, the park continued to hold a special place in her heart, remaining a preferred spot in the city. Eager for school, Nikki looked forward to acquiring new knowledge. Additionally, she had a passion for hiking, crafting, and composing poems. She was a student at Mountain View Middle School, where she was well liked by many peers, though her frankness occasionally led to confrontations, including one significant altercation that resulted in her expulsion. After finishing her schooling in 2004, Nikki made her way back home. The Hutchings family cherished their moments together in their abode. By then, they had relocated to a comparable 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom residence, situated a 15-minute drive from their previous location, in a more densely populated suburban area. Positioned at the end of a cul-de-sac, the Hutchinson home boasted stunning views of the mountains. With the annual celebration of All Saints' Day, or Halloween as it's widely recognized, on the horizon, the children of Bend, akin to their counterparts across the United States, delighted in dressing up for trick-or-treating. Nearly every home was adorned with decorations, and residents prepared sweets in anticipation, warmly welcoming the small witches and phantoms who would visit. By this period, the Hutchings' offspring had matured, finding themselves more captivated by gatherings and celebratory events than the tradition of trick-or-treating. Nikki had reached the age of 21, Amanda was 17, and Timmy had just celebrated his 13th birthday. On the evening of Sunday, October 31st, 2004, Amanda was preparing for her shift at a nearby department store planning to conclude her duties around 8 p.m. Lacking a driver's license, she depended on her parents or Nikki for a ride home. Despite the store's proximity, Amanda hesitated to trek back alone after dusk, particularly on Halloween. Hence, she requested Nikki for a pickup, but Nikki had plans to stay in, distributing sweets. Their dad, Jim, then a bus operator, offered to fetch her, prioritizing his daughter's safety above all. Before departing, Nicole, with a grave expression, sought a moment to discuss something significant with Amanda upon her return, hinting at another bout of her imaginative notions. The day unfolded ordinarily enough, with Robin and Nikki engaging joyfully in candy distribution to the visiting youngsters, reminiscent of the times the Hutchings themselves went trick-or-treating. Now, finding amusement in their role reversal, they relished the experience. After Jim came home and dined, he left to collect Amanda and attend to some chores. By 10 p.m., when the doorbell rang again, it seemed too late for youthful jests. With Robin occupied, Nikki answered the door, only to find a pleasant surprise. Several of her friends stood there, en route to a nearby Halloween festivity at a friend's place, eager for Nikki to join. Thrilled at the prospect, Nikki was all set to partake in the holiday merriment. Nikki informed her mother of her plans to enjoy the evening with her companions. Robin, undisturbed by her daughter's autonomous nature, trusted Nikki's responsible demeanor. She bid her a wonderful time, sending her off to the celebration with ease of mind. Unbeknownst to her, this farewell would mark the final occasion she'd witnessed the joyful grin of her eldest child. The memory of Nikki's final Halloween will eternally resonate with her family. The celebration was brimming with both acquaintances and unknown faces, all seemingly enjoying the revelry. Nikki, having been informed of the event last minute, attended in her regular attire, lacking the time for elaborate preparations. The atmosphere was charged with boisterous music, with attendees engaging in typical youthful merriment, drinking, dancing, and reveling deep into the early hours of November 1st. As the spectral night's excitement faded and life's regular rhythm resumed, the Hutchings family too began their day, immersed in routine morning activities. It was during this time that Jim realized Nikki's absence. Her bedroom was empty, a stark contrast to the last memory he had of her, diligently filling out a job application. Returning the previous evening with Amanda, he had presumed Nikki was asleep. Upon learning from Robin that Nikki had ventured to a Halloween festivity, Jim initially thought she might be recuperating from the night's excesses at a friend's house, expecting her return or a call by midday. However, as daylight waned and normalcy enveloped the town, Nikki's presence remained conspicuously absent. Her belongings, including her purse and identification, lay undisturbed in her room, a silent testament to her unanticipated departure. Concern deeply rooted in their hearts, her parents initiated a series of calls to Nikki's friends, desperate for any clue of her whereabouts. The evening was consumed with efforts to trace her, a prelude to the harrowing decision of involving law enforcement. Despite their exhaustive inquiries, Nikki's location remained a mystery. At this juncture, the Hutchings family was overwhelmed by a foreboding sense of dread, prompting them to contact the Bend Police Department. At the station, they were informed that Halloween night is notoriously one of the worst nights of the year due to a significant surge in criminal activity. The period is rife with car break-ins, vandalism, alcohol-related offenses, violence, and even fatal crimes. The police typically do not immediately respond to reports of missing adults, as many return after a short period. However, the fact that Nikki's money and identification were still at home raised concerns. The Bend police were aware that Nikki was 21 years old, stood at 5 feet 5 inches, weighed 159 pounds, and had chestnut hair and blue eyes. Additional unique identifiers included a small gap between her front teeth, a pierced tongue, and tattoos of a rose and a dolphin on the back of her left shoulder. She was last seen wearing a dark burgundy polo shirt with an emblem, black pants, and white tennis shoes. Detective Brian Kendall from the Bend Police Department met with the Hutchington family to compile a comprehensive report. He spoke with Robin, Amanda, and Jim, who shared their insights, Amanda mentioned that her sister wanted to discuss something serious with her that evening. The parents informed the detective about Nikki's ex-boyfriend, Bobby. Initially, he was well-liked by the family, appearing very charming and fitting in well, but over time they began to suspect that he was concealing his true nature, especially concerning Nikki. Detective Kendall resolved to pursue the individual for any further details. He intended to question Mickey's acquaintances regarding the whereabouts of the Halloween celebration, including inquiries about the organizer and all attendees. Concurrently, the Hatchings family was engulfed in distress, given the absence of any updates on Nikki for more than a day. Upon meeting Bobby, the detectives inquired about Nikki. He insisted he was not monitoring his former partner, noting their separation had occurred just the weekend before. Despite the detective's skepticism, a lie detector test indicated he was truthful. It was later established that he had an alibi for the night of Halloween, prompting the authorities to shift their focus elsewhere. The Bend police force released a statement soliciting any information regarding Nikki Hutchings, urging the public to reach out to Detective Kendall. A woman named Mary came forward with crucial information. She mentioned her cohabitants, Lauren Bowers and Craig Whiting, had hosted the Halloween festivity Nikki attended. Bowers had a girlfriend with 2 children. One was 6 years old, and the other was 4. Mickey would constantly come over to look after them, and that's how she met Mary. At the party was nothing unusual about it. Many people came and went during the night, and some brought friends along. At least the detectives now had 2 people they could contact. Quickly obtaining the address, the police officers went to Lauren and Craig to find out more details. That's how they spoke with Bowers' 30-year-old girlfriend. Craig was identified as a close acquaintance of the Hutchings and frequently visited in the evenings to extend party invitations to Mickey. He recalled seeing her last at the party close to midnight, a time when alcohol consumption was rampant, leaving everyone clueless about her subsequent whereabouts. While her friends were deeply concerned for her safety, they remained hopeful for her return. Alas, she had vanished without a trace since the event. Investigators questioned other attendees of the gathering, yet no one could precisely recall the moment of her departure. It seemed as though the young woman had abruptly vanished into thin air. The police pondered various scenarios. Had Nikki exited the premises by herself that evening? Was she under the influence, or had she been kidnapped? Could there have been an individual with nefarious intentions lurking? However, with no definitive answers at hand, they proceeded with their probe, deciding to broaden the search to include areas beyond the state lines. Nikki's photograph, together with comprehensive details regarding her vanishing, was circulated among law enforcement agencies nationwide. With the absence of fresh leads, investigators opted to scrutinize the backgrounds of the residents of the home where the festivity was held, in addition to the attendees. It was imperative to begin their inquiry from some point. Craig was found to have a clean criminal history, whereas Lauren Bowers appeared to have a questionable incident related to Nikki. The revelation was shocking. It emerged that the man had been a convicted offender a decade ago. Lauren had faced accusations of contributing to the delinquency of minors. Now, age 34, he openly acknowledged his previous wrongdoing to Detective Kendall, offering his cooperation in the search for Nikki as a gesture of his reformed character. This information was disconcerting, yet no direct link or proof suggested Lauren's involvement in Nikki's disappearance. The investigation was still in its preliminary phase of collecting information. In the meantime, Nikki's relatives initiated a community search in Bend. They disseminated leaflets bearing her image and particulars, engaged with local broadcasters, and reiterated their appeal for any leads to be reported to the authorities. Subsequent reports claimed sightings of the young woman in various locales within the city, albeit without verification. Nonetheless, these accounts provided the Hutchings family with a glimmer of hope. Jim, employed as a bus operator, would meticulously survey Drake Park, Nikki's cherished locale, each time he drove by, in the hopes of spotting her. Accepting the grim reality of her absence was a challenge for the family, who clung to the hope of her return. Each knock at the door raised expectations that it might be Nikki, yet it never was. The situation then took a grim twist. An informant disclosed to the police that an individual known as Spider had admitted to his acquaintances that he was responsible for Nicole's murder and had concealed her remains on his property. His actual identity was Danny Shane, a felon affiliated with a local gang dubbed the Park Rats, notorious for their criminal activities in Bend, especially around Drake Park. Nikki and Danny Shane were familiar with each other, having been classmates in middle school, though Spider had undergone significant changes since those days. When interrogated, he asserted that he had encountered the young woman a few weeks prior, aligning with the timeline of her vanishing. After successfully completing a polygraph examination, he was exonerated and released. The aerial units of the Bend Police Department were deployed to scrutinize Danny's land from the sky in search of any signs of soil disturbance indicative of a burial site, but their search yielded no results. As days turned into weeks and then months, the Hatchings prepared themselves for the possibility of receiving dire news, with the likelihood of Nikki being found alive dwindling. Nikki's 13-year-old sibling, Tim, who looked up to her immensely, was particularly devastated, leaving the family in a state of disarray. In a subsequent development, the Portland Police Department in Oregon reached out to the Hatchings family. The call they received was one no family ever wishes to get. They were informed about the discovery of a body that bore a resemblance to Nikki, and they were summoned for identification. The news sent shockwaves through the family, but Jim had one pressing inquiry: whether the deceased had a dolphin tattoo on her left shoulder. The agonizing wait for a response seemed endless, with the family grappling with the possibility of Nikki's demise. The moment the officer informed Jim that the discovered body lacked the tattoo, a fleeting relief washed over the Hatchings. Nonetheless, they were painfully aware that this meant another family would soon be confronted with heartbreaking news concerning their loved one. Investigators monitored Nikki's financial and digital footprints, including her credit card, bank account, and cell phone. After months of perseverance, they were alerted to activity on one of Nikki's cards, igniting a flicker of hope that she could be alive. This hope was swiftly dashed when Nikki's mother, Robin, disclosed she had been using her daughter's credit card, dashing any renewed hope. As time progressed, interactions with the detectives became less frequent, reflecting the stagnation of the case, and life for the Hatchings seemed to pause. Amanda pursued her high school studies and had applied to colleges, including the University of Minnesota, where she awaited acceptance letters. These aspirations now felt insignificant in the shadow of her sister's disappearance. However, she was later informed of her acceptance to the University of Minnesota with a full scholarship. Despite the joy this brought, she found herself unable to leave her family during such a distressing period. The narrative surrounding Nikki Hutchings' disappearance only unfolded after 3 painstaking years. It became evident that someone was concealing a vital piece of information, possessing full knowledge of the events that transpired, but lacking the courage to disclose the truth. In March 2007, a woman known as Jenny entered the Bend police station, seeking to speak with the detective leading the Hutchings investigation. As an old acquaintance of Nikki and the former girlfriend of Lauren Bowers, with whom she had 2 children, Jenny was driven by their rocky past and subsequent breakup to share what she knew. Initially interviewed after Nikki vanished, she had lied to protect herself. Jenny disclosed that Lauren, her ex, confessed to ending Nikki's life, though at that time, there was no concrete proof or remains to corroborate his admission. The detectives devised a strategy, persuading Jenny to covertly record a conversation with Lauren by wearing a wire and probing him about Nikki. The meeting was set in a park where Jenny, under immense pressure, inquired about Nikki's fate. Lauren, initially wary, eventually confided in Jenny due to her previous silence. He justified his actions by alleging Nikki was a threat to their relationship, and he could not risk returning to jail. Jenny's persistent questioning nearly compromised the operation, yet managed to secure Lauren's confession. Lauren was apprehended on March 12th, a measure taken partly to safeguard Jenny from potential repercussions. Further investigations into Lauren's past unveiled 2 prior convictions for sexual assault, resulting in a 2-year prison sentence. His victims were aged between 13 and 16. Post-release in 1997, Lauren briefly evaded his parole obligations and was later convicted for unlawful possession of a firearm, theft, and lying to the police. Upon arrest, an emotional Lauren denied any involvement in Nikki's disappearance, accusing his friend Craig Whiting of framing him, a claim that ultimately proved true. Craig Whiting, who came to pick up Nikki on that Halloween evening, was a close family friend of the Hutchings, having lived under the same roof with them for some time. He took a deep breath and stated that Lauren had asked him to help get rid of the girl. Craig said that Nikki had started spreading rumors about Lauren, alleging that he had inappropriately touched one of the children she was babysitting. If this were to come out, it would land Bowers back in prison. The children had told Nikki about Lauren's inappropriate actions and how he had photographed one of them without clothing. It was a serious accusation that could have severe consequences. Nikki informed the child's mother about the incident and then went further by filing a formal complaint with the Oregon Department of Human Services. Lauren understood that this could land him back in prison and decided to take drastic action. But how did Craig fit into all of this? It turned out that Craig had a disturbing childhood experience that had a profound impact on his psyche. When he was 11 years old, his mother's partner beat her to death and then hid her body in the basement under their trailer, where they lived next to the decomposing remains for several weeks. Perhaps this left a mark on Craig's entire life. However, he justified his actions regarding Nikki by claiming that Lauren was like a brother to him. If a brother asked for help, he felt obliged to do everything for him. It took a couple of days before Craig agreed to show detectives where they had buried Nikki's body. This helped him avoid the death penalty, but he showed no remorse or compassion. It was a very remote area in the middle of the forest, about 20 miles from the Halloween party location. Craig led the police to a spot amidst the trees where, according to him, Nikki met her demise. In a shallow grave, officers found what they believed to be Mickey Hutchings's remains. Nikki had done everything possible to protect an innocent child and ensure their safety, only to encounter the monster who would likely silence her rather than face the consequences of his despicable actions. As early as October 2004, they, along with their best friend Craig, devised a plan to get rid of Hutchings. This led them to organize a large Halloween party. On the eve of the incident, they journeyed to a secluded spot and excavated a shallow grave, approximately 3 feet in depth. During Halloween, Craig enticed Mickey from her residence. At the celebration, they incapacitated the young woman by spiking her beverage with a painkiller, leaving her scarcely able to control her legs. She was utterly incapacitated. Companions placed her in a vehicle, with Lauren at the wheel, transporting her to the predetermined grave site. Nikki, feeble, was escorted to a makeshift burial pit where Bowers delivered a blow to her skull using a bat adorned with a weighty metallic end. Craig believed a single hit would render her unconscious, yet it merely caused Nicole to stumble, prompting her to attempt to stand. Subsequently, Lauren seized a branch from White, assaulting her repeatedly until she fell into unconsciousness. Before Nicole ceased breathing, they disrobed her and cast her into the trench, subsequently covering it with dense soil. The most harrowing aspect of this narrative is that Nikki was still breathing at that juncture, perishing alone in the dense woodland, betrayed by 2 individuals she considered close on that dread-filled evening. Upon notifying the Hutchings family of Nikki's demise, her parents were astounded. Craig, whom they had welcomed into their home, and Lauren, a companion of Nikki. Jim's memory of identifying his daughter's dolphin insignia at the coroner's office is indelible. He expressed a desire to personally address these culprits, sparing the expense to taxpayers. Regrettably, legal constraints made this impossible. Nearly a year would pass before Lauren and Craig admitted guilt for the savage attack, each receiving a sentence of lifetime imprisonment without the chance for parole. The very nightmare they dreaded, which led to Nicole Hutchings' death in an effort to shield another's offspring, had come to pass. Now, these fiends are condemned to recall the young woman who attained retribution, even beyond the grave. Diamond Bradley, much like numerous others, adored social media during her teenage years, yet the issue lies in the fact that it's impossible to discern whether the individual on the opposite end of the screen is a friend, or if beneath a charming facade lurks an actual monster. Diamond Marsh Bradley entered the world on March 21, 2001, in Clarksville, Tennessee. She was the younger sibling to Daquan, who was 3 years older than her. At a certain juncture, their parents, Doris and Philip, opted for separation, prompting Doris to seek a more tranquil and secure environment for her children, away from the urban chaos. She moved Daquan and Diamond to a small town named Spring Valley in Illinois, where they had relatives, allowing the children to be raised alongside their cousins. Spring Valley is a quaint town situated along the Illinois River, with its population in 2002 barely reaching 5,000 inhabitants, and it has seen little growth since. The town lacked large malls or towering buildings. Instead, its residents built a closely knit community reliant on mutual support. Doris secured a position as a cook in a nursing home, where she dedicated over 15 years of service, ensuring her children had their needs met. As they matured, and Doris couldn't always be present, Daquan stepped into the role of guardian, mentor, and elder brother for Diamond, forging a deep bond that eventually evolved into a strong friendship. Diamond also spent considerable time with her cousin Giovanna, their resemblance so striking that many mistook them for twins. Later, Doris welcomed 2 more children into the family, a girl named Malia and a boy named Quentin. Despite Spring Valley's ideal setting for raising a family, its major drawback was the lack of activities for teenagers. Diamond was a quintessential girl who cherished singing, dancing, engaging in play with her siblings, and staging photo shoots. Additionally, she devoted numerous hours online as social media and smartphones gained widespread acceptance among the youth. Gradually, she took to actively seeking out internet users for communication, companionship, and amusement. By 2014, at around 13 years of age, she began to actively post, sharing a wide array of content on her page. Diamond disclosed everything from details about her personal relationships and invitations to socialize, to her affection for her family and adulations for her mother, whom she deemed the best in the world. At times, she would seek guidance or simply share her musings. Throughout her adolescence, Diamond navigated the emotional shifts typical of the journey from childhood to adulthood. There were moments when Diamond felt an overwhelming sense of distrust or a compelling need to confide in someone. Although Doris and other family members engaged with her posts, Diamond often yearned for the attention of fellow social media users. With limited activities in Spring Valley, her interest in boys began to blossom, and social media served as a sort of digital journal for her. She frequently updated her thoughts, posting multiple times daily. Through her posts, one could easily follow the evolving life and thoughts of the teenager during this time. She cherished and esteemed her family, yet at times felt profound ennui, seeking someone from the online community for a conversation. She candidly confessed her lack of friendships. She yearned for affection, craved attention, and shared her deepest feelings with anyone who would read her posts. Indeed, social media represented merely a fraction of a person's actual life. However, it offered a glimpse into the concerns and thoughts that preoccupied the young woman. At that period, Diamond was a high school student, and she had recently started dating Nicholas Nelson. They formed an adorable pair, spending ample time together and appearing genuinely smitten. The young woman was not fond of school. In the autumn of 2017, she aimed to complete her graduation through a special program by passing exams. She possessed a deep sense of empathy and aspired to a career in nursing. Though many viewed Diamond as youthful, her ambitions were significant. On January 23, 2018, the Bradley household buzzed with friends and family as they gathered to celebrate Doris's birthday. The night was brimming with affection and happiness, highlighted by a festive cake, tunes, and the sheer pleasure of being among dear ones. Unbeknownst to Doris, in less than a day, her life was poised to shatter. That night, the partygoers started leaving at 10 p.m. leading the celebrant to inform her daughter of her bedtime plans. Diamond bid her mother a good night and proceeded to take a shower. Typically, Doris would rise just before 7 a.m., prepare the morning meal, and see the younger kids off to school. She expected her oldest daughter to be awake by this time, yet she was conspicuously absent. The bedroom upstairs was vacant as well. At first, Doris was not alarmed, understanding her daughter's penchant for morning coffee runs to the nearby gas station. However, as time passed without Diamond's return, her worry intensified. Diamond lacked personal transportation, and the weather outside was a mix of wet snow and wind, hardly conducive for a stroll. When Doris attempted to reach her daughter by phone, it went directly to voicemail, an unusual occurrence. By 8:30 a.m., Dequan, who had been living apart due to his hectic schedule, came over as they had planned to rendezvous. The absence of Diamond's responses to her family's persistent texts and calls was alarming, especially since she was known to avoid causing them undue stress. Their concern deepened over the hours, and despite reaching out to all her acquaintances, no one had any information. Dequan drove through the town in search of Diamond, but their small community offered few hiding spots. Doris was overwhelmed by a spectrum of feelings, from dread to fury, fearing the worst had befallen her daughter. Never had Diamond stayed away this long without any word. The distress became unbearable for Doris, who, after depleting every option, reported her daughter as missing to the police at 6 p.m. The law enforcement team prioritized gathering details about Diamond's mobile usage and reached out to her cellular provider to pinpoint the phone's last known location via cell tower signals. A swift response revealed the device's final activity at 7:18 a.m., located 5 miles northwest of a tower in Tunica, Illinois. This information, however, only offered a broad search area without precise coordinates, leaving her whereabouts ambiguous. Following this, the phone either depleted its battery or was deliberately shut off, as there was no subsequent activity or social media engagement from Diamond. Her mother clung to the hope that Diamond's cousin Giovanna, with whom Diamond had spent the previous evening communicating, might hold vital information. Diamond often confided her innermost thoughts and plans in Giovanna, but hadn't specified her intentions for the next morning. Sensing the gravity of the situation, Giovanna chose to reveal a critical secret to Doris. Diamond possessed a second phone, unknown to her family, for internet access via Wi-Fi, discovered by Daquan in a dresser drawer, password protected and without a cellular plan. This revelation took Doris by surprise, unaware of her daughter's secret phone. Recognizing the urgency, she immediately brought the device to the police, hoping it might yield clues to her daughter's disappearance. Investigators deduced that the hidden phone was used for activities that wouldn't have received Doris's approval. Once they bypassed the lock screen, they encountered additional security measures. Each app required its own password. Despite this, notifications visible on the lock screen indicated several individuals inviting Diamond to meet. The investigation revealed that the 16-year-old had been using the device to interact on dating platforms, a revelation that shocked Doris but was not unknown to Giovanna. Diamond had taken precautions, advising her cousin to alert her at the first sign of danger, knowing the risks involved with her secret engagements. Doris had always been stringent about dating, especially aware of her daughter's inclination towards older individuals and the dangers of online interactions. She emphasized caution and the importance of skepticism when dealing with strangers, aware of her daughter's tendency to misrepresent her age. Despite warnings from her mother and Daquan about the perils of rushing into adulthood, Diamond crafted an arm-line persona that suggested she was older. As the search for Diamond continued, law enforcement expanded their efforts beyond the digital realm. They canvassed the Bradleys' neighborhood, speaking with locals, checking nearby businesses, and gathering surveillance footage in hopes of uncovering any leads. At Diamond's regular coffee stop, only one low-resolution camera provided any footage, capturing a nondescript dark vehicle and its adult male driver. With scant evidence to go on, authorities concentrated on this individual, meticulously analyzing the video in search of any detail that might lead to Diamond's whereabouts. The girl's brother set out to nearby towns to put up flyers with a photo and description of his sister. For some reason, he was convinced that she had been abducted and taken out of town. Daquan knew that time was running out and they needed to hurry. He blamed himself for oversleeping that morning and not coming home earlier, as he could have prevented Diamond's disappearance. On January 25th, Doris and Jasmine, another of Diamond's cousins, went to the police to provide important information about Diamond. It turned out that the missing girl wasn't just getting acquainted with boys. Unfortunately, she had gotten involved in something even more dangerous. Jasmine explained that on dating sites, Diamond noticed pop-up advertisements offering meetings with men on a commercial basis. It was a kind of business, and the high school student was very intrigued. She wanted to understand how it worked and learned that some men paid women to meet with them. No one knew how curious Diamond was or how long this had been going on, but obviously, the girl had placed advertisements of herself on adult websites, which was one of the reasons why there were so many notifications on her lock screen. Almost all of these messages were from unfamiliar men who had either responded to the advertisement or her profile on dating sites. Doris felt like a bad mother. She couldn't even imagine in her worst nightmares that her underage daughter would decide to earn money this way. But Daquan saw things differently. His mother always knew how to balance strictness with giving her children some freedom. Diamond likely didn't grasp the gravity of engaging in such transactions. She might have assumed she'd be compensated for merely spending time on dates, particularly with older men who she thought would be more financially generous. At heart, she was exploring life with the naivety of youth, unaware of the dangers lurking on those platforms, unseen threats posed by individuals seeking to exploit the most vulnerable. The allure of easy money for social outings was a dangerous curiosity. Law enforcement was aware that many youths in Spring Valley found themselves ensnared in monotony, with their primary pastime being the digital world, a realm their guardians scarcely understood. This disconnect left many parents oblivious to the digital hazards their children navigated daily. In response to the escalating concern, the local police sought the FBI's assistance for advanced resources to access and analyze data from Diamond's primary phone, aiming to reconstruct her movements on the day she vanished. This collaboration bore fruit, as they managed to chart the route taken by Diamond, suggesting she was in a vehicle, given the rapid pace of movement detected. An extensive review of surveillance footage from the area identified 13 vehicles, yet the poor quality of the images thwarted efforts to discern license plate numbers. An inventive approach saw the deployment of a patrol car equipped with a dash cam at a strategic intersection, which, after 2 days, helped filter out vehicles frequently traversing the locale, isolating a red pickup and a black Jeep that ceased to appear thereafter. Without immediate evidence to prioritize these vehicles, the police opted to methodically narrow their focus, beginning with these two. Further surveillance linked the black Jeep to another location along Diamond's last known trajectory, sharpening the investigation's focus on this particular vehicle. Simultaneously, detectives delved into Diamond's digital interactions, scrutinizing communications on her dating applications and social media platforms. A pivotal discovery was the last message Diamond sent on the morning of her disappearance, directed to a 26-year-old known as Gerald, or Jay, among his circle. In the course of the investigation, the individual in question, Jay, acknowledged a romantic connection with Diamond, but clarified that he had ceased contact upon learning her true age. On the morning of January 24th, at 6 a.m., Diamond had invited him to meet at an IHOP restaurant. Almost immediately, she retracted the invitation, apologizing and claiming the message was intended for someone else. Jay responded with a benign, smiley face. At 6:40 a.m., a distressing message from Diamond arrived, stating, "I'm dying." Upon discovering that Jay was the last known contact of her 16-year-old daughter, Doris was overcome with rage and despair, confronting him with accusations of harming her child. In her grief, she was prepared to cast blame on any potential suspect. Jay, however, provided a solid alibi, claiming he was home all night engaged in video games, corroborated by a female companion's presence. Initially reluctant under pressure, Jay revealed that this companion was none other than Giovanna, Diamond's cousin, adding a layer of complexity and confusion to the investigation without advancing the search for Diamond. Redirecting their attention back to the black Jeep, investigators uncovered additional surveillance footage capturing the vehicle en route to Putnam County, whereafter Diamond's phone signal vanished, either powered off or battery depleted. This vehicle became a focal point of the investigation, believed to be crucial in uncovering Diamond's fate. Tragically, the urgency of the situation escalated when, on January 27th, 3 days following the report of Diamond's disappearance, the sheriff's office in Putnam County received a significant call before noon, suggesting a grim turn in the ongoing search for the missing girl. A pedestrian strolling down the pebble path in Granville Township spotted the corpse of a young woman in the ditch beside the road. Upon the arrival of the head of Putnam County at the location, it was clear to him that this incident was no mishap. The young woman's life had been deliberately ended by another. The wounds were distributed across her body, on her back, stomach, legs, arms, and hands. She was a young African-American female. The police chief recalled that a young girl fitting her description had been reported missing in Spring Valley, prompting him to make an immediate call there. The area was rural, blanketed in snow at this season, flanked by cornfields on either side of the path. The closest dwelling was a good few miles from the spot. Diamond Bradley's remains were partly submerged in water due to a brook that flowed through the ditch. The defensive injuries made it clear that the girl had resisted fiercely to the very end. In the wake of the grim discovery of Diamond Bradley, the lead detective made the somber journey to the Bradley family home, tasked with the unbearable duty of conveying the tragic news. The moment police appeared at their doorstep around 7 p.m., Doris felt an ominous stir in her heart, a premonition of sorrow. Her breakdown, even before the news was verbalized, spoke volumes of a mother's intuition. The return of Dequan to a home engulfed in grief brought him face to face with a reality far removed from his hopeful assumption of Diamond's return. The crushing weight of the truth, that his sister was found deceased, overwhelmed him to the point of fainting, a testament to the bond and the burden of unfulfilled promises he bore.
As the news permeated the small community, every inhabitant was profoundly disturbed. The thought of allowing their children to roam the streets filled them with dread. What if the creature was hiding close by, searching for its next prey? The investigation team intensely scrutinized the black Jeep seen in the security video. To refine their search, the police consulted an automotive shop that specializes in such models. A technician meticulously reviewed the video and confidently pinpointed it as a certain model year of a Jeep Wrangler. Armed with this detail, the officers fed it into their databases, pulling up all the addresses and names of individuals in the vicinity who owned Jeep vehicles fitting that specific profile. After checking with numerous owners of similar Jeeps, the officers reached a home located roughly a few kilometers north of where Diamond's remains were discovered. A lady opened the door, stating that the black Jeep's owner had relocated to a different municipality named Standard, though she lacked any forwarding address. Standard, being merely 2 miles distant and home to about 200 people, made the task of locating the individual seem less daunting. Cruising through the county, the police spotted a black Jeep Wrangler in the driveway of a residence. The car belonged to 26-year-old Richard Henderson, who on January 24th had indeed ventured into Spring Valley, stopping at a gas station opposite the Bradley residence. He was the individual seen in the gas station's surveillance video. Inside the station, he awaited a call from a friend, but departed without the call coming through. The detectives meticulously scrutinized Henderson's behavior, the pauses in his narrative, and his facial cues. Noticing his momentary falter, they queried the name of his friend. He disclosed Diamond, admitting ignorance of her surname. It then became an exercise in investigative prowess. The seasoned detectives adeptly navigated the conversation, coaxing a confession from Richard. He confessed to meeting Diamond that day. Their initial plans aborted. Henderson claimed to have left Diamond at a mobile home community, a location contrary to the direction of Diamond's phone's trajectory. This discrepancy led to suspicions of either phone theft or deceit. Seizing the opportunity to elicit a full admission, the investigators suggested a patrol car ride retracing the path taken by Henderson and Diamond that day. They embarked from the gas station, proceeded past the traffic junction captured on video, over a bridge, and into the pastoral expanses of Pantom County. The journey halted where Diamond's phone signal vanished. The only remnants of the young girl were plush toys and synthetic blossoms at her memorial beside the creek bed, transforming the scene entirely. Diamond's memory was eternally preserved by her loved ones, the vibrant flowers contrasting starkly with the surrounding snowy white terrain. These items, much like Diamond herself, were out of place. The minor, delicate girl was abandoned in that ravine, her vitality ebbing away. Upon the detective questioning Richard about his recognition of the site, he lost his composure, tears streaming down his face. The detective, seizing the emotional moment, urged him to disclose the events. Henderson, overwhelmed, averted his gaze from the memorial, sobbing. His account was succinct. Their visit to the secluded area was for an intimate encounter. Afterwards, when Henderson asked her to leave the car, she refused, brandishing a knife instead. A struggle ensued, with Richard claiming self-defense. He asserted that in an attempt to deflect her knife-wielding hand, the blade accidentally penetrated her abdomen. Despite this, Diamond allegedly remained aggressive. Richard admitted to disarming and striking her possibly twice in purported self-defense before leaving her in the ditch. Nonetheless, the autopsy contradicted his narrative, revealing over 20 stab wounds on Diamond, some even on her back. Standing at nearly 6 feet tall and double Diamond's weight, who was just shy of 5 feet, Henderson's explanation was implausible. He was fully grown, confronting a child. By the time they commenced their search, Diamond had already passed away. At the service, more than 200 individuals gathered, encompassing family, friends, peers, and educators from Spring Valley High School. Opting for cremation, Doris wished for Diamond to remain perpetually close to her. The notion of leaving her daughter in a graveyard was unbearable for her. Thus, she carried Diamond's urn everywhere, including to the courtroom during Henderson's sentencing. Richard negotiated a plea, admitting his guilt to circumvent a life sentence, ultimately receiving a 53-year term without the chance for parole. Doris confessed to harboring thoughts of ending her own life due to the profound absence of her daughter. However, the consideration of her surviving children held her back from such a finality.
The woman identified was Amy Carlson. The individual asserted he was unaware of the cause of her death or the manner in which her remains were transported to his Colorado home from California. He explained that he had not resided in that dwelling in recent years, instead offering it as a temporary refuge for transient visitors. He claimed to have just come back from a business journey, only to find the distressing discovery in the bedroom. Following his report, law enforcement officers proceeded to his residence for an examination. Upon entry, they encountered an unexpectedly celebratory environment within the house. The hallway was embellished with vibrant lanterns guiding to the distant room, which was alive with twinkling and gleaming lights. The bedroom was festooned in a whimsical theme featuring unicorns, rainbows, heart decals, and soft toys, primarily in hues of pink. The bed was arranged as a ceremonial area. At its heart was a turquoise sleeping bag, illuminated by fairy lights, encasing a decaying corpse. The state of the cadaver indicated that the woman had passed away several weeks prior. Her pale, excessively thin skin seemed almost surreal. Her face was sparkled and appeared to be painted. The eyes had deeply sunk, leaving merely 2 dark cavities in her visage. Her lips had withered and dried to the extent that her teeth were prominently exposed. A downy blanket with star and planet motifs covered the remainder of the body. In addition to the mummified remains, 7 adults and 2 slumbering children were found within the premises, all seemingly cohabitating unperturbed by the presence of the corpse in the rear room. All 7 adults were detained on charges of mishandling a corpse. The children and the 7 adults found residing in the house represented merely a fraction of a collective known as Love Has Won. This label was attached to a novel spiritual movement spearheaded by 45-year-old Amy Carlson, the same individual whose preserved remains were discovered in the Moffett, Colorado residence. The Love Has Won organization sustained itself through contributions from its online followers. They operated a YouTube channel on which daily updates were shared, communications were broadcasted, and all activities were orchestrated under the guidance of Amy Carlson, even posthumously, who was venerated as Mother God. Prior to leading this group, she had worked as a manager at McDonald's. Amy was born on November 30th, 1975, in Kansas, and she was the oldest of 3 sisters. From a young age, she was aware of her extraordinary talents. Her supernatural abilities started to show by the age of 5, when she began communicating with angels. Concerned by her abilities, her parents sought the counsel of various church pastors. On one occasion during a sermon, Amy experienced a psychological episode, declaring the pastor's words to be untrue and loudly insisting on this until she was escorted outside. This narrative comes from Carlson herself, though her family members do not acknowledge such events. Amy was an exemplary student and was seen by those who knew her as a kindly and gentle rural girl who was reserved and never caused disturbances. At the age of 9, Amy's parents divorced, and her father remarried. The custody dispute resulted in the children dividing their time between their mother's home in Kansas and their father and stepmother's residence in Oklahoma. Amy spent her teenage years like any other teen, except she maintained a fondness for childlike motifs such as unicorns and rainbows, amassed a collection of soft toys, and loved all things pink and glittery. Her parents believed she would outgrow these interests, but Amy remained attached to them, considering them not just decorations, but part of her essence. After completing high school, Amy relocated to Houston, Texas, engaging in church choirs and theater. It was during this period that she began to express interest in more esoteric subjects, including extraterrestrial vehicles, and viewing herself as a higher entity. Her choices in partners were poor, leading to 3 marriages and 3 children with different fathers by her early 20s. Her fascination with these interests eventually eroded the emotional bond with her last husband. The presence of her children did not deter her pursuit of new and exciting experiences. Carlson did not embody the nurturing maternal figure and often left her children in the care of others, demonstrating a lack of the altruistic trait typically seen in parents, finding even her own children's company tedious. Amy's interest in New Age spirituality grew, and by the early 2000s, she was actively participating in a forum called Lightworkers, a community that believed in mutual healing and elevation, striving to achieve their fullest potential collectively. She dedicated numerous hours to interacting with fellow forum users who shared her interests, particularly engaging with an individual named Amrit Whiterig, with whom she communicated most extensively. On September 1st, 2007, Carlson shared a captivating entry on the forum, claiming she had been visited by a celestial entity. This entity disclosed to her that she was destined to become the President of the United States. She narrated an incident where, while cleaning the kitchen, she felt a nudge on her shoulder. Turning around, she found no one there, but then she received a communication informing her of her future role as the nation's leader. The message, though akin to the sound of violins, was interpreted by Amy as a divine signal. Whiterig held her in high esteem at that juncture, feeling her ethereal energy resonate with his. They began to describe their connection as a single soul split between 2 bodies. This notion was romantic, yet it bore a negative consequence on others. Amrit persuaded Amy that she was the earthly manifestation of divinity, encouraging her belief for either genuine conviction or opportunistic reasons. She adopted the title Mother God and insisted on being addressed as such. Amy, who had always relished assuming different personas,
conveyed to her admirer that no singular form could encompass the entirety of Father God's essence, suggesting that Father God was dispersed among various men. This rationalization allowed her the liberty to engage with multiple partners, believing herself capable of embodying the full spectrum of the Creator's energy. The concept of being Mother God captivated Amy far more than the mundane reality of being a conventional mother to her children. Ultimately, she chose to distance herself completely from her familial ties, informing her husband of her departure and severing connections with most of her kin. Motivated by her calling, Amy made her way to Crestone, Colorado, to join forces with her counterpart Amrit Whiterig, aiming to initiate a global awakening. Recognizing the enormity of their mission, they established the term Galactic Federation of Light, and, in December 2009, started disseminating their beliefs via a YouTube channel. Their teachings were a blend of New Age spiritual conspiracy theories and certain mainstream religious practices, with a central emphasis on the adoration of Mother God. Online, Amy was portrayed as a celestial entity, aged 19 billion years, who had manifested everything as Mother God. She informed her followers that she had experienced 534 reincarnations, including lives as Jesus, Cleopatra, Joan of Arc, and Marilyn Monroe, a mix that did not faze Carlson. Her declared goal was to guide 144,000 select individuals into the legendary fifth dimension. Furthermore, Amy professed that Donald Trump had been her father in a previous existence, and that she maintained a profound connection with the spirit of the deceased actor Robin Williams, now deemed an archangel. Williams, according to her, was a part of her spiritual cadre, frequently relaying messages from the afterlife. She also claimed to possess an advanced technology responsible for the cataclysm that engulfed Atlantis. Although she salvaged this technology, she couldn't fully transition to her fifth dimension since humanity wasn't prepared for her ascension. Historically, female-led cults are uncommon, yet Amy's exceptional charisma and influence enabled her to sway and control those in her circle. Amy, self-styled as Mother God, aimed to establish harmony on Earth and lead humanity towards a significant spiritual awakening, followed by an ascension with 144,000 devoted followers aboard starships to a blissful realm. Her vision promised a higher state of consciousness devoid of suffering for her followers, whereas all non-believers would be condemned to dwell on the sun, destined to combust and petrify. Carlson propagated the belief that the world was under the sway of a secretive elite cadre, intent on sustaining a global, low-vibrational energy level. Amy rallied a close-knit group of approximately 17 followers who resided with her, conducting daily live streams on YouTube to expand their audience and boost their subscriber base, a critical measure to support their communal lifestyle through donations. Despite the incredulity of her claims, individuals were drawn to her, severing ties with their families, surrendering their finances, and dedicating themselves to the worship of Mother God. Initially, the live broadcasts were managed by Whiterig and Amy, but the responsibility gradually shifted to their adherents. Nearly every stream teased the imminent arrival of spaceships to Earth, yet each new session deferred this event, attributing the delay to widespread human ailments, global corruption, and the general populace's oblivion. In this precarious juncture, they deemed it imperative to retain Amy's presence on Earth. Their broadcasts attracted thousands who donated eagerly, prayed for global cleansing, and Amy's eventual ascension to her destined plane. This repetitive cycle, finding Amy still among the living each day, proved to be a source of distress for her followers. Beyond soliciting donations, Carlson marketed dietary supplements online and offered what she termed etheric surgery for $88 a session. This service, purportedly conducted by Amy, claimed to eradicate all physical and spiritual maladies, and astonishingly, numerous individuals availed themselves of this so-called etheric surgical procedure. Amy's partnership with Whiterig concluded in 2014 after he chose to end their relationship. However, Carlson swiftly found a successor in 35-year-old Miguel Lamboy, whom she bestowed the title of Archangel Michael Silver, and together they embarked on a renewed venture named Love has won. Throughout the years, Emmy continued to assert her divine status, nominating various individuals to assume the mantle of Father God. At the time, it was believed by Carlson and fellow group members that Miguel was battling advanced lung cancer, having already undergone the removal of one lung, with his survival appearing precarious. Yet his devout belief in Amy's purported mystical abilities facilitated his recovery. Consequently, Miguel was prepared to support her unconditionally. Miguel's role extended beyond his spiritual duties alongside Carlson. He was instrumental in managing the logistical and financial aspects of the Love Has Won movement. By 2019, it had been established as a nonprofit charitable entity, with all pertinent legal documentation registered under his name. This arrangement was intended to ensure that, should Amy ascend, she would remain unencumbered by earthly belongings and free from legal obligations. From 2014 to 2018, the movement experienced significant growth online. Those residing with Amy affectionately referred to her as their mother, a title she reciprocated by calling them her children. Initially, she truly embodied the nurturing qualities of a compassionate, attentive caregiver, offering guidance and comfort to each member. Her presence was a source of sustenance for all, but as time passed, Carlson's demeanor drastically changed. She began to consume alcohol excessively, evolving into a harsh, authoritarian figure prone to unpredictable and severe outbursts towards her followers. She unjustly accused them of betrayal without any evidence, subjected them to physical punishment, regulated their intimate relationships, and prohibited their alcohol consumption.
Unable to cope with his partner's escalating alcoholism, Miguel Lamboy discreetly departed, leaving his whereabouts unknown. In 2018, Carlson encountered Jason Castillo, who assumed the role of the new Father God. As Amy's inseparable ally, he supported her through her alcohol-fueled lifestyle, which had by that time inflicted significant harm on her physique, rendering her unable to walk. Instead of assisting her, Castillo simply transported her wherever needed, showing tenderness towards Amy, yet displaying a harsh and aggressive demeanor towards others residing with them. The nature of their live streams evolved, with members of the group spending hours in front of the camera, occasionally responding to followers' inquiries or sharing snippets of their everyday activities. Amy and Jason, despite living under the same roof, never made an appearance on these broadcasts. This circumstance persisted for several months, and followers from various regions grew anxious about Mother God's location. They received information that Amy was engaged in a conflict with the elite and had sustained severe injuries. Allegedly undergoing spiritual etheric surgery, her devotees were advised to pray for her healing. In truth, Carlson was caught in such an extensive period of heavy drinking that she almost ceased consuming food. On September 13, 2018, Amy Carlson presented herself to her followers, looking severely thin, brittle, and notably weak. She attributed her state to having assimilated and neutralized 99% of the planet's negative energies, which resulted in her ill health and nearly confined her to bed. Her revelation that her physical form might not withstand much longer led her to impose stringent sleep limits on her group, to ensure there was always someone available to help her. Sleeping beyond 5 hours was met with penalties, and casual eating was banned. The communications from their YouTube channel took on an increasingly menacing, antagonistic, and arrogant tone, designed to intimidate viewers and critique the flaws of the current world in an effort to solicit more financial contributions. Amy, gravely sick, would make appearances in videos asking for medicine, which in reality was tequila. Ex-members of the group reminisced about their time with Love Has Won, noting an initial phase of profound self-discovery, acceptance, and affection. Yet they quickly found themselves relegated to menial labor, filling their time with domestic duties, entertainment like dance, games, or protracted prayer sessions. The stringent diet and sleep protocols led to loss of weight and deteriorating health. Despite the detrimental atmosphere, the initial weeks were recalled as the most joyful period of their lives, with a complete dedication to the great mission. As the COVID-19 pandemic spread, the Love Has Won organization started marketing colloidal silver as a cure, despite warnings and a ban by the Health and Human Services Agency due to the risks associated with consuming silver ions. Despite warnings, Amy's excessive intake of colloidal silver led to her skin turning a bluish hue. In May 2020, a former group member was discovered in a forest, nude, confused, dehydrated, and undernourished, after being cast out for allegedly possessing too low energy. By year's end, Amy, Jason, and 14 loyal followers relocated to Hawaii. Their peculiar actions and Amy's assertion of being a Hawaiian deity incited local opposition and protests, ultimately forcing their departure back to Colorado. Amy's condition worsened significantly. She grew weaker and was bedridden. Despite her dire state and pleas for genuine medical care, her followers declined outside medical assistance, fearing it would expose her to further risk. Opting to pray for her recuperation, they neglected to provide Mother God with the medical intervention she desperately sought. In the subsequent year, the situation grew increasingly complex. Devotees of the sect believed they might lose Amy at any moment. The group relocated to California and initiated a fresh series of broadcasts. On April 16, 2021, during a live stream, a member informed the audience that matters were not progressing smoothly and that Amy was nearing her physical demise, potentially leaving her corporeal existence at any time. That same night, he announced in an update, "Mother is set to ascend tonight." Amy's biological family, her mother and siblings, were vigilantly monitoring these updates to glean insights into her condition. The latest news deeply concerned them. The family reached out to the authorities, requesting a welfare check. But upon the police's arrival at the given address, they were greeted by 2 sect members at the door, claiming Amy was absent. The following day, another member declared on his social media that the Divine Mother no longer suffers. She has ascended, leaving her followers to appreciate the immense benevolence Amy contributed by rescuing their wayward spirits and negating all malice in the world. Followers were convinced that Amy Carlson, deemed the originator of all and Mother God, had departed this realm for good, a belief reinforced by other members who remarked on her passing and shared her images. Oddly, mere hours after these tributes and snapshots were shared during a live session, another sect member suggested Amy was still battling for life and currently recuperating. Subsequently, 9 days afterward, the police uncovered Carlson's remains following Miguel Lamboy, erstwhile known as God the Father, reported a grim discovery at his residence. It emerged that Amy's companion, Jason Castillo, along with her adherents, had transported her body by car from California back to Colorado, to Lamboy's apartment where their journey commenced. They arrived unannounced, failing to inform him of Amy's demise. The sect insisted that Mother God had recently been alive, showing signs of life through movements of her hands, rhythmic chest rises and falls, and a detectable pulse. Nevertheless, the decomposition state indicated she had passed away significantly earlier. In essence, the followers were in denial about her death, interacting with their deceased leader as though she remained among the living. Owing to the state of the corpse, establishing the precise reason for Amy Carlson's demise proved challenging for the medical examiner. It appears that her death was primarily caused by excessive consumption of colloidal silver, coupled with alcohol intake and anorexia. Irrespective of her journey's end, Amy had ascended to the 5th dimension. On one side, her adherents rejoiced, yet on the other, they found it hard to adjust to existence without their guide. Jason Castillo and 6 other members of the group faced charges related to the mishandling of human remains. They spent the summer and autumn of 2021 awaiting their trial, only for the prosecutor to suddenly and without fanfare dismiss the charges in December, opting to let these individuals be. The collective's assets, valued at $300,000, were listed under Miguel Lamboy's name, who was also the sole proprietor of the group's main facility. Following the removal of Amy's body from his property, he vanished with the funds, prompting speculation that he was the actual architect of the scheme, orchestrating events from behind the scenes. He refuted these claims, stating that it is common for spiritual leaders to use alternate names in official records. Lamboy further professed his ongoing faith in Amy and her celestial origins. Following the demise of the cult leader, the Love Has Won movement persisted, fragmenting into various groups, all active online and marketing assorted items. Its members hold on to the belief that they will eventually ascend to the fifth dimension to reunite with Amy Carlson. Jason Castillo has established his faction, claiming to embody both Father God and Mother God energies, and asserts that his is the only genuine group, labeling the rest as imposters. Now residing in tents with his close associates, he shares his experiences on the internet. Astonishingly, these splinter groups from the Love Has Won movement continue to function, drawing in followers and securing donations. To this day, there are individuals who have faith in their cause and are prepared to financially back them. This narrative seems like a segment from a horror film, yet it is a portion of an actual incident that occurred in the Philippines on December 10th, 2021. When three masked intruders forced their way into the family residence, 17-year-old Janice found herself concealed beneath her bed. The invaders searched each room, and the girl managed to hide under the bed. Uncertain of when her bedroom door would swing open, she remained silent, utterly still. Unable to make an emergency call for fear the conversation might be overheard, Janice, with shaky hands, began to send a message in the family group chat, hoping her parents, who were at work, would see it. At home with her siblings, she could hear their cries. It was 2:48 p.m. Frozen with fear, she didn't dare to move, while her distress signal remained unseen by her parents. Unsure of what other action to take or who else could help, at 3 p.m., she took to a social media platform, posting that intruders had entered the home. She was hiding under the bed, and she feared for her life. Then, the sound of footsteps nearing her door left her wondering if it was the assailants or perhaps assistance had finally arrived. Upon his return, Janice's father was met with the harrowing reality that 2 of his 3 children had not survived. This peculiar incident drew comparisons to a particularly notorious Hollywood horror film, where the unfolding events seem predictable at first, yet the outcome proves to be far more dreadful than one could have ever imagined. The dawn of December 10th, 2021, marked a day of unforgettable significance for the Magwad family. For the first time, Janice referred to her adoptive parents as Mom and Dad, a milestone moment for any parent who has welcomed a child into their lives. This act signified that Mr. and Mrs. Magwad had truly gained their daughter's trust, filling them with immense joy and sending them off to their jobs, feeling uplifted. While Cruz was teaching, a colleague discreetly informed him through his classroom door that his family's residence had been assaulted, urging him as the family's patriarch to hurry home immediately. Overwhelmed with panic, Cruz hurriedly left the classroom and sped to his vehicle. The drive from the school to his residence took approximately 15 minutes. Cruz was acutely aware that his 3 children were at home, potentially in danger. In his rush, he left behind his keys and found the front door locked upon arrival. He attempted to open it, shaking the handle and pushing against the door to no avail. Panic escalating, he loudly called out for his children, but was met with unsettling silence. Circling the house, Cruz's alarm intensified upon discovering a blood-stained blanket and a knife, missing its handle by the door. He hurried to the back door, continuing to call for his children, yet the silence remained unbroken. Fortunately, he found the back door unlocked. Cruz paused, deliberating on how best to safeguard his son and daughters. With a brief moment of hesitation, he stepped inside, hoping to catch any intruders off guard and protect his children if they were being held captive. Moving quietly through the kitchen and into the living room, Cruz was confronted with a scene that instantaneously shattered his world. The entire lounge area was drenched in blood, with pieces of glass from shattered vases and items drenched in blood, including pots and baseball bats. At the heart of the chaos were the lifeless bodies of 2 of his 3 children, no longer alive. The perpetrator of this act was undoubtedly disturbed, unhinged, and furious. The extent of the injuries was horrific, with one of the victims missing an ear, which had been severed. One daughter survived by hiding under the bed during the assault, listening to every sound from beneath. What was meant to be one of the happiest days of Cruz Magwad's life morphed into an absolute horror. The moment he shut his eyes, the images of his son and daughter sprawled in the lounge haunted him. The Magwad household was made up of 4 individuals: the parents, Cruz and Lavella, along with their 2 adolescent children, 16-year-old Louis and 18-year-old Gwen. On a certain day, the siblings gathered their parents in the lounge to discuss the importance of welcoming a 5th member to their family. They proposed the inclusion of Gwen's 17-year-old friend, Janice. As an orphan, who had bounced from one home to another, serving as a live-in maid without any prospects for education, Janice had been thrust into adulthood at nearly 8 years old. The siblings convinced their parents to allow Janice to join their household, promising to undertake household chores in exchange for a sense of security and affection. Raised by Cruz and Lavella to extend a helping hand to those in dire straits, the couple deliberated and chose to offer Janice a shot at a stable life. In the Philippines, the absence of adequate resources or a support network for a young woman could tragically lead her to homelessness. The Magwads, deeply devout, believed that their capacity to assist someone else was a divine opportunity afforded by God's blessings on their family. Consequently, Janice was warmly welcomed into the family fold through formal adoption, with all legal formalities duly completed. Mr. Magwad was employed as an elementary school teacher and was well respected, garnering accolades from his peers. His wife, Lavella, held the position of principal at the same school, meaning their income was modest. Yet within their community, they were deemed affluent due to owning land and being able to financially provide for their offspring. Louis Magwad, the family's youngest, stood out for his magnetism. Though serene in demeanor, he possessed a boundless vitality. Encounters with him often led individuals to divulge their innermost sentiments, as Louis exuded a warmth and empathy that encouraged openness. He was non-judgmental, intellectually curious and artistic, engaging in guitar playing, reading, sketching, and harboring aspirations of pursuing a legal education post-high school. Gwen, his elder sister, was notably industrious and vivacious. Since her early years, she had advanced through every rank of the scouting movement, amassing a collection of badges for her accomplishments. In her senior school years, Gwen took pre-medical classes at a nearby university, aiming for a career in medicine. She devoted her leisure to volunteer work, always ready to lend a hand to those in distress. It was at a mutual friends gathering that Gwen encountered Janice, who was employed as a manny. While the festivities unfolded, Janice was preoccupied with childcare duties. Gwen was taken aback to learn that her contemporary was already engaged in work. As their friendship deepened, Gwen inquired about Janice's path to nannying, uncovering that Janice had been forsaken by her parents, left aboard a cargo vessel and discovered by a benevolent stranger. This kind soul attempted to locate Janice's family using social media and the internet by posting her details and photograph, yet no one claimed her. Consequently, Janice was entrusted to the care of the Philippine Social Services. Her earliest vivid memory was of feeling lost on a vast ship, yearning for a childhood unburdened by worries and longing for a mother's comfort after a minor fall. Janice aspired for academic success to facilitate college attendance, but her circumstances necessitated work over study. Gwen and Janice's bond strengthened as they spent time together, experimenting with makeup, hairstyles, conducting photo shoots, and creating TikTok content. Amid attempts to capture a dance routine they choreographed, Louis, the spirited younger brother, would often jest from behind the camera, eliciting laughter. Their camaraderie was filled with joy, leading the Magwad siblings to propose to their parents the idea of integrating Janice into their tightly knit family circle. Gwen and Louis's parents were notably disciplined. They refrained from indulging their offspring with lavish gifts and did not permit them unlimited freedom. Responsibilities were assigned to each member of the household. It was expected that all would contribute to housework. The children had to excel academically, participate in church services on Sundays, and support one another. Nevertheless, Gwen and Louis deeply admired their parents for their nurturing approach. The decision to adopt Janice underscored the tight-knit nature of the Magwad family. Subsequently, Janice took over Louis's room, while he relocated to the living room sofa. Upon Janice's integration into the household, she was embraced as a full-fledged family member. The Magwads ensured her security. She was promptly registered for school, liberating her from the need to earn her own living. For the first time, she was able to embrace her youth and indulge in envisioning her future. The adoption brought the siblings closer. They persisted in their photography sessions, went on family vacations, savored their time off, and returned re-energized. Yet this does not imply that the transition was seamless or without its challenges. Many adoptive parents can attest to the difficulties faced when integrating a new child into the family. The child must adapt to unfamiliar surroundings, assimilate new guidelines, and build trust, a process that demands time. The Magwads benefited from Cruz and Lavella's educational insights, enduring patience, and their willingness to empathize with and comprehend their children's perspectives. The initial occurrence transpired a few months post Janice's incorporation into the Magwad household, which boasted a modest farm for pig rearing. Following the sale of a piglet, Cruz had a surplus of $200, which he stashed in a container in the living area for unforeseen expenditures. That month, an urgent need for medical care arose when Cruz's aging parents were hospitalized. But upon checking the container, Cruz discovered it was starkly empty. Each member of the household adamantly denied accessing the funds. Although not financially affluent, the Magwads were not excessively wealthy either, prompting a thorough search throughout their home for the vanished funds. The search extended for hours until one of the siblings uncovered a hidden compartment within Janice's backpack. Overwhelmed, Janice admitted her actions, having concealed the $200 inside a secret pouch she crafted in the bag. She struggled to articulate her reasons and broke down in tears. Cruz, far from furious, was simply baffled. Janice feared their wrath and anticipated expulsion for betraying their trust. The Magwads recognized that Janice's upbringing was vastly different from that of Gwen and Louis, having spent much of her life fending for herself. They were aware that such incidents of theft are not uncommon within households, particularly during the initial stages of integrating children from orphanages. This behavior often stems from a survival instinct, hoarding resources against future uncertainties, in fear of potential abandonment and returning to a state of need. Certainly the Magwad family felt let down, yet they didn't regard the incident as critically grave. It paralleled the instances when their own child erred. Now that Janice was their child, abandoning her was out of the question. They endeavored to comfort her, emphasizing that she no longer had to fret about her future, as she was an integral part of their household. Following this disheartening event, the familial bonds strengthened, becoming more cohesive. With the shift to online education, Gwen took it upon herself to assist Janice with her studies. On December 10, 2021, as the parents were preparing to depart for work, Janice addressed them as mom and dad for the initial time, marking what should have been a momentous occasion. However, a significant revelation emerged. Janice, their adoptive child, was not an orphan as believed. She had been actively engaging with her biological mother through social media platforms. On December 10, 2021, discovering his two offspring motionless at the center of the living room, Cruz knelt beside them, attempting to detect a heartbeat, but found none. Overwhelmed with despair, he appealed to the heavens, pondering why both were taken from him. Then, realizing he must look for his third child, he composed himself and proceeded upstairs. He advanced, hoping not to encounter another lifeless figure. Calling out for Janice, he was met with the sound of a door creaking open. He hurried into the room and began to urgently check her body for injuries, ensuring she was safe. The child was intact, yet inexplicably she was soaked. For an instant, Cruz was seized by fear, mistaking the liquid for blood. Janice, panting heavily, recounted to her father that 3 individuals had broken into their home, assaulting Gwen and Louis. She had managed to flee to her room and conceal herself under the bed. She was petrified by the screams that echoed below, feeling helpless about aiding her siblings until silence ensued. In her state of panic, she opted for a bath, a peculiar choice given the recent violence. The act of bathing, especially under such dire circumstances, was unconventional. Cruz struggled to grasp Janice's behavior but endeavored to offer solace. He aimed to remain resilient, though internally he felt as though everything was scorched. Mrs. Maguad arrived promptly after the law enforcement, finding Janice, drenched in both water and tears, on the veranda. She embraced the girl, expressing gratitude to the divine for her safety, inquired about Gwen and Louie's whereabouts. It fell upon Cruz to break the harrowing news to Lavella that 2 of their children were victims of the assault. Mrs. Maguad, the head of an elementary school, was typically poised and decisive, even in emergencies, yet now she found herself shattered. She was devoid of answers, strategies, or even the faintest clue on how to proceed. They clung to each other in tears as their residence was sealed off with tape, marking it as a crime scene. The police uncovered an array of evidence within the living room, featuring various items that might have served as weapons in the crime. A blood-stained baseball bat, a hammer, numerous kitchen knives, one of which was discovered near the entrance, pots, and shattered glass bottles. The authorities were tasked with gathering and documenting all pieces of evidence, to then correlate them with the injuries found on the bodies of the Maguad siblings. Gwen bore multiple stab wounds across her face, chest, and abdomen. A blow to the face often suggests deeply personal motives, such as envy. The sheer savagery of these incidents is incomprehensible. Defensive injuries were evident on her hands and wrists, showing Gwen resisted fiercely to the very end. Her hair was caked with coagulated blood, and she was missing an ear. Upon examining Louie, the coroner identified 51 stab wounds. This level of violence transcended the mere act of taking a life, indicating a profound personal vendetta. The extent of mutilation on the teenagers' bodies was such that mortuary staff had to sew up the wounds before the parents could proceed with funeral arrangements. The initial version was based on the testimonies of investigators, concluding that the criminals targeted one of the wealthier families in the area. They did not anticipate anyone being home, but when detectives noted the presence of valuable items like a TV, phone, and laptop in plain sight, they changed their opinion and dismissed the burglary theory. The second theory involved family disputes over land, with Lavella having siblings who claimed the land. Despite rumors of disputes over this land, investigators found nothing to support this theory and had to abandon it as well. The community and family sought answers as local residents feared for their safety, given that even teenagers were not spared by the criminals. The entire investigative unit focused on this crime, with the mayor offering a $5,000 reward for information leading to the arrest of the attackers. Meanwhile, detectives decided to search the house and surrounding area again, expanding their search area. It was then they stumbled upon a vegetative stream near the Maguado house, essentially a small pond. They were incredibly lucky to find a small plastic bag caught on a branch in the stream containing blood-stained clothing, likely worn by the criminal after committing the act. Following this discovery in the pond, the police re-examined the Maguado house for clues, searching for anything remotely suspicious. Meanwhile, online users conducted their mini-investigation, unsatisfied with either the burglary or land dispute theories. They concluded, albeit unconfirmed, that the crime was committed by someone who survived. Such statements often hurt those who have already suffered greatly, but in this case, the online users had their evidence. First, regarding the unusual choice to bathe amidst such a crisis, Janice's decision to take a bath after hiding from the assailants, instead of checking on her siblings or alerting someone as the disturbance ceased, raised eyebrows. Online sleuths theorized that Janice's bath was an attempt to cleanse herself of her siblings' blood after harming them. Cruz Maguad, once the immediate shock of his loss diminished, also acknowledged the peculiarity of her actions. Initially, his overwhelming relief at finding his adopted daughter unharmed overshadowed any scrutiny of her behavior. Another puzzling aspect was Janice's silence during Cruz's frantic calls for his children. Given the modest size of their home, it seemed improbable that she wouldn't hear his cries. She only revealed herself after Cruz discovered the bodies of Gwen and Louis, adding to the suspicion. Additionally, the claim that the attackers invaded her room without noticing her, despite a thorough search, suggested either a lack of thoroughness by the intruders or a discrepancy in Janice's story. Forensic analysis found blood droplets in her room, which she attributed to the perpetrators who allegedly murdered her siblings. The timing of Janice's plea for help further complicated the narrative. She messaged her family group at 2:48 p.m., although autopsies indicated the Magwad siblings died around 2 p.m. This delay in seeking help, almost 50 minutes after the cessation of their screams, along with a social media plea filled with emojis, struck many as incongruent with someone in a state of panic. Her decision to alter her surname on social media shortly after posting for help was also deemed ill-timed. Concurrently, law enforcement discovered blood spots in areas of the residence where, according to the young woman's account, they were unexpected, like the laundry area. Despite the absence of any struggle indicators, the presence of blood spots on the sink and floor invoked further inquiries. Once the evidence gathering concluded, the Magwad family received permission to re-enter their dwelling for cleaning. Amid this period, Lavella was utterly devastated. As detectives proceeded with their scrutiny, she grieved profoundly for her lost offspring. As her sorrow momentarily subsided, she found herself simply curling up, lying in wait for the grief and the sharp sting of loss to overwhelm her anew. Seeking a diversion, Lavella began tidying the home, initiating with Janice's chamber. During this task, she encountered an ID card unfamiliar to her within their home, swiftly delivering it to the authorities. The ID was that of a 17-year-old male, known primarily by the moniker Marlon, whose actual name was withheld. Lavella had no acquaintance with Marlon, nor had she ever encountered him. Yet neighbors witnessed the youth en route to the Magwad residence on the day in question. A shopkeeper also recognized him, providing directions to Cruz and Lavella's abode. Additionally, a motorcyclist reported transporting Marlon to the location on the day the tragedy struck the teenagers. This discovery marked a significant breakthrough in the investigation, prompting the question of how Marlon's ID found its way into Janice's quarters. Summoned for interrogation, the officials hardly anticipated the girl could elucidate the presence of the ID in her room. However, Janice composedly acknowledged knowing the boy, subsequently breaking down to admit her involvement in her siblings' tragic end. Janice's confession remained undisclosed to the public due to her minor status, leaving the extent of her involvement in the tragic event somewhat ambiguous. It is known that Marlon, who worked at a church maintaining the premises for services, had some form of association with Janice, although the nature of their relationship and how they came into contact were not detailed in media reports. On her social media, a photo with a different young man was discovered, prompting police investigation. This individual, believed to be her boyfriend, had noticed Janice's plea for help online and attempted to contact her that day. When he called, the call was picked up but met with silence, leading him to eventually disconnect, assuming Janice might have exaggerated the situation. The investigation took a turn when Marlon was located by the police. His denial of involvement became untenable after Gwen's phone was discovered in his possession. Compounding his predicament, he had also been recently apprehended for possessing illegal substances. When the Magwad family took Janice in, they believed they were giving an orphan a chance at a new life, unaware that her biological parents were still alive. She maintained contact with her mother Michelle and Juanita on social media, revealing a more complex background than initially thought. Janice's early life was marked by significant hardship, with her family struggling to provide basic necessities, such as food, leading to a diet primarily consisting of sweet potatoes. Her father's frequent alcohol consumption due to financial strains added to the family's difficulties. The circumstances of how Janice became separated from her family remain unclear, whether she was abandoned or simply got lost, but she was indeed found alone on a cargo ship on September 22, 2013. The Magwads offered Janice a semblance of the loving family environment she had never experienced. Witnessing the care and protection Gwen and Louie received from their parents, juxtaposed with her own traumatic upbringing, stirred a mix of emotions in Janice. Despite being adopted, she was treated with the same affection as the Magwads' biological children and was expected to contribute to household duties equally. However, Janice struggled with the family's expectations and the shared affection and responsibilities, longing for undivided attention and the full extent of what the Magwads could provide. Her desire to enjoy the privileges of being the sole child in the household led to a conflicted relationship with the reality of her situation, where love and material benefits were not exclusively hers to claim. On the fateful morning of December 10th, the day that would end in tragedy, Janice notably addressed her adoptive parents as mom and dad for the first time, signaling her belief that her ultimate aim was within reach. Janice was aware she could never surpass Gwen and Louie in the eyes of the Magwads due to their biological connection, and saw elimination as the only solution to this perceived inequality. Subsequent investigations revealed text messages and tagalog on Janice's phone, suspected to be exchanges with Marlon, which unveiled her grim intentions. In these messages, she expressed a desire to end the lives of 7 individuals without naming them, and held a belief in divine forgiveness for her actions if she were to repent. 6 days post the attack, on December 16th, authorities detained both Janice and Marlon, treating them as juvenile offenders rather than placing them in a conventional prison setting, owing to their minor status. During their separate trials, each was sentenced to 10 years for assaulting Gwen and an additional 22 years for the murder of 16-year-old Louie. The relatively mild sentences, attributed to their ages, sparked public outrage and the vehement disapproval of the Magwad parents. In pursuit of justice, Cruz and Lavella turned to the media and national officials, advocating for a reassessment of the judicial outcomes. In an emotionally charged interview, Lavella disclosed her willingness to forgive Janice, attributing her heinous actions to her disadvantaged background and lack of opportunities. However, a pivotal moment occurred during a face-to-face encounter with Janice in custody. Lavella looked into the eyes of the girl she had embraced as her own, searching for any sign of repentance or turmoil, but found none. Janice's gaze was void of empathy or regret, filled instead with a chilling detachment and resentment. This revelation compelled Lavella to retract her sentiments of forgiveness, recognizing that the girl they had welcomed as a blessing had, in reality, brought them an unimaginable nightmare.
A youthful sports enthusiast was relishing his holiday, but on an overcast day, to everyone's surprise, he disappeared. For numerous years, investigators were baffled by the potential outcomes. It was only several decades afterward that the answer emerged, causing a chill to run through those who remember the incidents of that particular day. Perched at an elevation of 10,000 feet, amidst the magnificent Austrian Alps, the Stubai Glacier Resort stands as a distinctive and relatively undiscovered gem for travelers. The sole access to this location is via a gondola ride upward, whereupon an awe-inspiring panoramic vista greets you, making you feel atop the world. Yet beyond its heady beauty, the area is fraught with hazards, evidenced by numerous cautionary signs dotting the landscape. If you possess the audacity to ignore the restrictions here, you might find your life hanging by a thread at any instant. This was precisely the fate of a 23-year-old Canadian ice hockey athlete. Nonetheless, the narrative that unfolded was even more horrifying. On the 9th of August, 1989, Duncan McPherson left his diminutive red automobile in a verdant valley in Austria, not far from Innsbruck. He stepped out and paused for a moment, absorbing the breathtaking scenery that unfolded around him. He found himself near the Austrian Alps, encircled by towering mountains. Born on the 3rd of February 1966 in Saskatoon, Canada, Duncan was a remarkable defenseman for the Saskatoon Blades, anticipated to shine brightly in future drafts. In 1984, he was drafted by the Islanders, a professional ice hockey team in the United States. Unfortunately, his ascent to the Premier League was thwarted by a grave injury in September of that year, with subsequent injuries following.
The continual setbacks left Duncan frustrated, aware that these obstacles were preventing him from achieving his dreams, leading him to reckon that his hockey career might be over. However, rather than succumbing to despair and hanging up his skates for good, McPherson chose to adapt. He embraced a proposition from the Dundee Tigers in Scotland, taking up a role as a player coach. In 1989, Duncan made the decision to join a modest professional hockey team, aspiring to excel as a coach since his playing days were compromised. He was expected to commence his new role on the 12th of August. Prior to embarking on his new journey in Scotland, McPherson chose to enjoy a brief hiatus. The rigors of professional sports demand daily, extensive training sessions for nearly the entire week, and Duncan decided to grant himself a holiday to roam across Europe, reconnect with old acquaintances, and explore new sights. One of his initial stops was in Germany, where an old friend from his childhood offered him a car. His next intended destination was the Austrian Alps. Notably skilled in skiing, McPherson harbored aspirations to master snowboarding. After relishing the idyllic environment, Duncan secured his car and made his way across the parking lot to the cable car station. The gondola, akin to a sky tram affixed to a cable and adorned with multiple windows, traverses the mountain's expanse, ascending and descending. While some visitors partake in the gondola ride solely for the spectacular vistas from above, its fundamental function is to ferry individuals to certain inaccessible locales on the mountain. The gondola Duncan intended to board was designed to transport riders from the station near the parking lot to an elevation of approximately 10,000 feet in the Austrian Alps. Adjacent to this was another station known as Ice Grotto, which was situated next to the Stubai Glacier Ski Resort. Stubai stood out not just for its wide range of slopes, but because the slope down which skiers and snowboarders glided was not merely a snow-laden mountain slope, as typically found at most ski resorts. It was an actual glacier. During the warmer months, when other ski destinations worldwide ceased operations due to snow scarcity, Stubai Glacier Resort encountered no such issues. In the summertime, amid the heat, massive tractors known as snowcats, equipped with large rakes, would ascend and descend the glacier. They pulverized the top ice layer, converting it into snow powder. They refined the ski slope surface by pulverizing the hardened ridges and snow clumps into smooth, uniform particles. This allowed for skiing under any weather conditions. Upon arriving at the lift station and settling into the cabin, Duncan could once again marvel at the scenery through the window. The vibrant green of the valley gradually transitioning to the rugged, snow-capped Alps. His path led him to the equipment rental area, where he picked out a snowboard, boots, and all the essential gear for his downhill adventure. McPherson had prudently booked snowboarding lessons in advance. His initial session was set for 11 a.m. Fully kitted out, he awaited his instructor at the glacier's base. The instructor began with snowboarding fundamentals, teaching him how to fit the boots into the bindings, utilize the board's edges, and shared various safety guidelines. Rather than heading straight to the glacier, they started practicing on a level area below, focusing on the nuances of correct snowboarding technique. Only once the instructor deemed Duncan fully prepared did they move toward the button lift, a revolving cable with bars that skiers or snowboarders clung to with a bar while standing on their equipment, which then hoisted them up the slope. Duncan and the guide arrived at the glacier's summit and initiated their premier descent. Securing themselves on the snowboard, they began to inch forward, methodically navigating the incline step by step, mimicking the motion of a cascading leaf. As McPherson was a beginner, he meticulously adhered to his guide's directions, cautiously under his watchful eye. The guide offered Duncan advice on maintaining equilibrium, decelerating, or accelerating. He swiftly discerned Duncan's adeptness at balancing and self-stabilization. His leg strength matched that of a seasoned professional ice hockey player. Following a gradual hour-long journey down the glacier, they arrived at their destination. McPherson performed admirably, though their session concluded slightly prematurely due to a mild onset of rain. Numerous skiers ceased their pursuits and hurried back to the resort to escape the worsening weather. It was nearing 1 p.m., around lunchtime.
Duncan and his guide opted for a quick meal. Mid-meal, the guide observed Duncan's sweater drenched through. He recommended Duncan shed his damp attire and offered to dry them in his office. By day's end, McPherson was to collect them. Acknowledging the wisdom in the suggestion, Duncan relinquished his soaked sweater to the guide. Meanwhile, Duncan visited a nearby store and purchased a new sweater. While dining, they delved deeper into personal stories and exchanged amusing anecdotes from their experiences. Post-lunch, as they gazed outside, the rain had subsided, giving way to dense fog blanketing the vicinity. While some skiers ventured back onto the slopes, others preferred to conclude their day. The guide commended Duncan for his commendable performance on his initial snowboard descent and proposed he return to the slope for solo practice of the fundamentals. Should he master these, more advanced techniques would be introduced the following day. Intrigued by the proposition and undeterred by the fog, McPherson, with snowboard in tow, made his way to the lift as the guide attended to another client. On the following day, Duncan's snowboarding mentor arrived at his workplace slightly ahead of schedule. Alighting from the gondola, he made his way to the resort, procured a cup of coffee from the same cafe where he had dined with McPherson the preceding day, and after consuming his coffee, he collected his snowboard along with his gear and proceeded to the base of the lift to rendezvous with his pupil from the day before. Nonetheless, when the appointed time for their lesson arrived, Duncan was nowhere to be found. Having waited an additional span, the mentor felt a twinge of disappointment. He had taken a liking to his charge and was eager to impart further knowledge to McPherson that day. Yet he was aware that vacationers frequently forego subsequent snowboarding or skiing lessons for a myriad of reasons during their holiday, or they might simply overlook them. Regardless, the mentor didn't harbor it as a personal slight. He remained optimistic that the young man would make a return, particularly since his sweater remained unclaimed in his office. A week ensuing, Duncan's folks were taken aback by a phone call from Scotland by an official of the Dundee Tigers hockey squad, where their offspring was slated to commence a coaching role following his short stint in Europe. The caller was puzzled as to why Duncan had failed to report for duty. Disturbed, the parents were at a loss. Their progeny had been buoyant about the prospect of coaching the team and would not intentionally miss his inaugural day at work. They assured the team's envoy that they would attempt to reach Duncan and ascertain the cause. Nonetheless, following that conversation, the parents swiftly came to terms with the fact that contacting their son was unfeasible. Aware that Duncan had embarked on a European tour, they were clueless about his travel itinerary or the sequence of countries he intended to visit. It was the year 1989, a time when the convenience of making a call with a mobile phone was yet to be a reality. Bewildered about their subsequent steps, the parents couldn't fathom why their diligent son missed his first day at work. In a move that seemed rather extreme at the time, they opted to report him as missing to Interpol, which facilitates international police cooperation. Yet, both were cognizant of the likelihood that their case wouldn't be prioritized by any European law enforcement agency. At 23, Duncan was robust, intelligent, and mentally sound. The only apparent issue was his absence from a few initial days at a new job. It was conceivable he chose to prolong his holiday, albeit unprofessionally, but feasibly. Alternatively, he might have reconsidered the coaching offer or been merely held up. There were several rational reasons for Duncan's non-appearance in Scotland. The authorities suggested the McPhersons initiate their search instead of passively awaiting his return. Without delay, they embarked on this course. Packing their luggage, Duncan's parents ventured to Europe, driven by a sense of urgency and the intuition that something was wrong. Without even a hint of Duncan's European itinerary, they were at a stark disadvantage. Their basic strategy involved distributing countless flyers featuring their son's photo and a contact number across numerous cities. They followed up on every tip, no matter its perceived insignificance. Despite these exhaustive efforts, their progress was non-existent. A month into their quest, they managed to persuade several European news outlets to air a segment on Duncan. A broadcast in Austria proved pivotal. It mentioned the car Duncan used, a small red vehicle borrowed from a childhood friend, which he failed to return as promised. This lead took them to the Stubai Glacier's parking area where the car was parked. Upon discovering this, the McPhersons hastened to Austria to collaborate with the local police. Inside the vehicle, they uncovered Duncan's passport, a letter from his girlfriend sharing his enthusiasm for the move to Scotland, and a bag of spoiled fruit. This discovery propelled the Austrian authorities to intensify the search for Duncan. On the subsequent day, law enforcement officials scheduled a comprehensive search in the vicinity of the discovered vehicle. Duncan's parents were resolved to participate in the search effort. Upon their arrival at a local hotel, they adhered to their routine of distributing flyers adorned with their son's image to anyone they encountered in the lobby and affixed them throughout the premises. Serendipitously, one of these flyers found its way to Duncan's snowboard coach, who recognized the young man instantly, recalling the unclaimed sweater still in his possession. He informed the McPhersons that he had instructed Duncan in snowboarding and noted Duncan's unexplained absence following their scheduled session. He further revealed that Duncan had never retrieved his sweater, marking the last instance he was seen or heard from. Duncan's mother's initial query concerned her son's disposition, whether he exhibited signs of stress, fear, or worry. The instructor, lacking detailed insights, endeavored to respond to their inquiries, noting Duncan's intention to practice snowboarding later that day. Upon receiving information that Duncan was last spotted at the Stubai Glacier ski resort, a contingent of police volunteers and a comprehensive search team ascended the mountain via lift. They meticulously scoured the glacier, descending the mountain's slope, thoroughly investigating the area without uncovering any evidence of Duncan's whereabouts or clues to his vanishing. This process was replicated on the following day, with a significantly enlarged search party covering not just the Stubai Glacier, but the adjacent mountainous expanse. Nevertheless, their efforts were fruitless. Consequently, to the profound disappointment of Duncan's parents, the official search was concluded after the second day. Nonetheless, the McPhersons remained undeterred, dedicating the next 14 years to the search for their son. They revisited the Stubai Glacier repeatedly, meticulously examining every section of the terrain, familiarizing themselves with every resort staff member and each contour of the ski slopes. Their resolve never wavered. United by a singular ambition, they persisted in their quest to locate their son. In July 2003, a full 14 years after Duncan went missing, an employee at the Stubai Glacier ski resort was ascending the mountain via the tow rope. As was his custom, he glanced around the surroundings when a bright object on the slope caught his attention. Assuming it was litter, he intended to remove it and skied towards the yellow item upon reaching the top. However, as he neared, the shock of realization halted him. What he thought was trash turned out to be a fragment of a brightly colored jacket. This discovery eventually led to piecing together the events that likely transpired on August 9, 1989. Following a motivating lunch with his snowboard instructor, Duncan was eager to hit the slopes alone. The fog had descended upon the glacier, providing a serene, tourist-free environment ideal for a novice. With snowboard in hand, he confidently approached the tow rope and ascended to the glacier's peak. Ensuring his bindings were secure, Duncan commenced his descent through the empty, fog-enshrouded slope. With each meter, his confidence surged as he picked up speed, leveraging his innate balance and physical prowess. However, in a fleeting moment, Duncan lost control, snagged an edge, and was thrust forward into a fall, the impact breaking his leg and causing excruciating pain. Crevasses pose significant threats on glaciers, often being vast and inescapable, leading to immediate or delayed fatalities for those who fall in. The Stubai Glacier presented a unique hazard in the form of small, pothole-like fissures on its surface, particularly after rain. These crevices, though smaller, were diligently monitored by resort staff to prevent accidents. Skiers were typically cautioned to remain vigilant of such dangers to avoid mishaps. Yet, the dense fog during Duncan's descent obscured his vision, leading him to unwittingly step into a fissure, resulting in a broken leg. Positioned mid-slope, Duncan was too distant from both the base and the summit to seek assistance.
and the fog's density ensured he remained unseen by others. Alone, injured, and stranded, he was left to contemplate his dire situation amidst the enveloping fog. At that moment, another resort worker mounted one of the sizable snowcats stationed at the glacier's summit. These vehicles were generally employed to crush the upper layer of ice, converting it into snow. Given the day's rainfall and significant snowmelt, the worker had to traverse down the slope from the peak to the base, pulverizing the ice to lay down a fresh snow layer. Igniting the engine, engaging the rear rakes with their spinning metal blades, and ensuring all systems were operational, the worker commenced the descent. The vehicle proceeded at a snail's pace, barely exceeding 3 miles per hour, due to the severely limited visibility caused by the mist. Abruptly, at the very last moment, the operator spotted something right in his path. With a swift maneuver to the side, he narrowly avoided a collision, almost making it. However, the heavy treads skirted dangerously close, and the back rakes with their whirling blades snagged the object, dragging it a few feet. The operator immediately shut down the engine, leapt out, and rushed to inspect the object. To his shock, it was a person lying there, Duncan McPherson. The whirling blades had gruesomely disfigured his body. One arm was entirely severed and shredded into pieces, and a leg was nearly completely cut off. It is speculated that Duncan wasn't dead at the time. The injuries were severe but not instantly lethal. In theory, he might have been rescued. Nevertheless, overwhelmed by panic and believing he was unseen due to the fog, the worker made a dire choice. Thinking he was responsible for striking the young man rather than assisting Duncan, he opted to bind him to the snowcat and haul him to a deep crevasse on the glacier. Casting McPherson, possibly still alive, into the crevasse with his severed limbs, the worker employed the snow vehicle to cover the crevasse, concealing his actions. Duncan's demise was sealed in a frozen tomb. Over the ensuing 14 years, the glacier gradually receded until the sight of Duncan's yellow jacket emerged on the ice's surface. This is what the resort worker observed while ascending on the ski lift, mistaking it for debris. Skiing down the slope to retrieve the jacket, he was confronted with the visage of Duncan McPherson, encased in the ice. The young man appeared as though he was still 23, his features preserved by the ice's frigid temperatures, which prevented any decomposition. Initially, the belief was that Duncan had accidentally tumbled into the crevasse during his descent, finding himself ensnared in a frosty snare from which he could not escape, leading to his demise. The injuries he bore were presumed to be inflicted by the shifting ice. Yet upon the recovery of his body, it was evident he had been cleaved into sections, his apparel ripped apart, and his snowboard shattered into fragments. All remains and broken parts of the snowboard were discovered in proximity. Had Duncan been dismembered by the glacier's natural dynamics, the pieces would have been dispersed at varied locations. This revelation suggested that the young man's death was not simply a result of falling and freezing. He had encountered a tragic end due to a collision with heavy snow-clearing machinery. Duncan's parents were merely notified of the recovery of their son's remains, with the explanation that he had met with an accident years prior. Desiring the full story, the McPhersons sought the expertise of an independent investigator. The analysis of the body parts and snowboarding gear by a range of professionals, including forensic experts, radiologists, and medical doctors, unanimously supported the theory that McPherson had been struck by snow-clearing machinery, after which his body was concealed beneath the ice. Author John Leake, after scrutinizing the photographs depicting the injuries of the late hockey player, penned a book named Cold a Long Time, an Alpine Mystery. In it, he elaborated on this case. The operator of the snowcat present on the slope that fateful day was never formally recognized or prosecuted due to the expiration of the statute of limitations. Accountability for the demise of Duncan McPherson, the youthful Canadian hockey player, has remained elusive. In an effort to avoid controversy, the event was eventually dismissed as a sorrowful mishap.